Welcome back, my friends, to the show that occasionally ends, but will then be back again. It is always a pleasure, an honor, and a privilege to be joined by, amongst other people, well, right to my left, possibly your right, depending on how you view the screen, or maybe the other way around. Uh, the Master Gunnery Sergeant himself, Greg Rector, will be joined in the very near future by my usual co-host, Brent Vieira. Brent. I upgraded him from Brock to Brent. Brock. I made him Canadian. I Canadianized him.
Yes, you did. I'm the one who's up here. I'm the one who's north of the border. Come on now.
But that's the Canadian version of Brock. Brent Vieira. Brock Vieira will be joining us. And then in a few minutes after that, we will be joined by your friend, my friend, everyone's friend, and our number 2 ranked friend of the show, Mr. Josh Keatly, to discuss this week's game of the century, the Ohio State University versus Penn State. Yes, I see your Penn State sweatshirt. We can start breaking down that game a little bit even before Josh gets here. But those are not the only consequential games this week.
No, they are not.
Duke and Miami is an important game for both programs. Air Force and Army will have a lot to say about the Commander-in-Chief's trophy. Back in the conference that we're discussing, the Big Ten, you've got Illinois versus Minnesota, which almost smells trappish. Obviously, Illinois is coming off of an emotional and difficult they've come through most of the toughest parts of their schedule, but Minnesota is a team you don't want to sleepwalk against. And speaking of trap games, San Diego State is laying in the weeds for Boise State coming off one of their biggest wins.
Yeah, I'll wait until Brock appears to say more about the Boise State Broncos defeating the UNLV Running Rebels.
Yes, please do.
I'll wait.
Please do. Oregon and, of course, Michigan, who are now conference rivals, which I'll have to get used to saying that. But they will be playing in a very consequential game. I'm very interested to see how Ole Miss and Arkansas look. Arkansas is one of those teams that nobody enjoys playing, though they are not super talented at some positions. They have usually this year and almost every year I can think of good offensive, defensive line play. Iowa State, thinking of sort of trappish games, takes on a Texas Tech team that sometimes looks very good and then sometimes looks average. We'll see which one of them they are in the next game. Indiana, speaking of trap games, plays a sturdy, once again, maybe a little under-talented, but really a hard-playing Michigan State team. Kansas State goes against a talented Houston. I'm sure Clemson is on upset alert against Louisville. They are right now, they are in the playoff, but a loss to a team like Louisville probably knocks them out. Kentucky and Tennessee, this is a potential play-out game for Tennessee. If they have Kentucky's been tough this year. If they show up flat, that could knock them out of the pool of 12.
Tennessee is just really hated by every state that they border, and it is really not a pleasant thing for the Volunteers to deal with all these states that border them: Kentucky, Arkansas, Georgia, etc. They just have a very, very tough time dealing with these border states that they have to play. And if Kentucky matches up against that offensive line, matches up well against that Tennessee defensive line, which has been playing phenomenal, except against the Razorbacks.
Right.
It's going to be a very tough game.
Yeah, I feel like it's going to be a physical battle. I think you're going to see the team that can, withstand the physical force the other team brings to the table. I think they'll need – I know we joke about establishing the run, especially nowadays, but I do believe that this is a game where the team that is able to consistently create third and short, second and medium, third and short over and over again, that team probably wins. I don't think big plays, or at least not big offensive plays, are going to decide that one.
No.
Another game, Greg, that I've circled as a possible trap adjacent game is Texas A&M, South Carolina. Once again, we'll find out if this is a new Texas A&M, because the old Texas A&M, the Jimbo Fisher Texas A&M, this is exactly the kind of game they would lose, right? Exactly the kind of game they would lose. They would show up flat, give up some early and sort of easy. There's Brock. Some early and easy opportunities to the other team, make a mistake in special teams, have a silly turnover, silly penalty, something. Uh, a guy would drop the ball before he crossed into the end zone, whatever, some kind of way. Texas A&M in the previous administration would find a way to lose that game. How are we doing, Brock?
I'm doing good. How are you?
It's Friday. I'm talking football. I'm with both the master gunnery sergeant himself, Greg Rector, and the babyface assassin, one Brock Vieira. We're going to ask you for your on-the-spot, well, not on-the-spot anymore, but your formerly on-the-spot reactions to the game you covered for Team MBS, and then Greg is going to harass you. But first, tell us your experience and what you noticed when you were watching the game for the press box.
Yeah, so I was at the UNLV Boise State game last Friday, and it was definitely a back and forth game, but there is a massive difference between Boise State and UNLV in that game, and that was simply coaching. Barry Odom and his coaching staff, and I guess because I'm a UNLV homer, because I cover the team, have done a phenomenal job since they came to Vegas a little under 2 years ago. But Spencer Danielson is one of the rising stars in college football for a reason. Boise State was poised. They did everything right. And when it came down to not being sloppy, not committing the unnecessary turnovers, doing the right things, and most importantly, not committing the costly and unnecessary penalties, that's exactly what Boise State did. There was multiple times UNLV was flagged for basically dumb penalties, multiple unnecessary roughness calls. There's a late hit out bounce call and things of that nature. A couple of random holding calls and things like that. And Boise State didn't commit them. UNLV did, and that ended up being, I believe, the 5-point margin of victory for Boise State. Offensively, UNLV looked absolutely horrific on the night, which is something you don't typically say about a UNLV-led offense under Brendan Marion, but there was times throughout that game where it was Haj Malik Williams, the quarterback for the Rebels, playing hero ball throughout the day. A lot of times they would go out into pass plays, and they would have to start scrambling because everything downfield was covered, and the pocket kept collapsing on him quickly. There was a variety of times where they called runs up the middle with Jet Lester and I said Jet Thomas. I apologize, Jaden Jet Thomas, and he just couldn't get any traction because there was no holes for him to run through. Ricky White had a very quiet night, and it seemed like the Rebels stopped targeting him as the game went on, which is something that was quite interesting considering he is one of the best wide receivers in the entire nation. On special teams, Ricky White has like 3 blocks of the season, a block return for a touchdown, but they couldn't get home. Boise State did a great job in the punt protection. And then on the offensive side of the Broncos, there's always Ashton Genty. And that's something that UNLV prepared for, and they basically held him in check for majority of the game. But because of that, their quarterback, Maddox Madsen, had himself an incredible night. They ran play action to a T. They executed everything with no problems. They kept hitting their targets down the field, and they kept pushing the ball, and that was one of the main difference makers as well. And then when there was nothing downfield, Madsen would just take off and run for a first down, which he did time and time again. Last thing I want to add to that game of why Boise State defeated the Rebels and why they should be considered the top team to enter the college football playoffs as the automatic non-Power 5 qualifier, but also why they should be considered one of the more dangerous threats to actually compete for the national championship is that their only loss in the season is to Oregon, who's the number 1 team in the country, in Eugene by 3 points. They do everything right. Ahmad Hussein is one of the more underrated defensive ends of the country, and he showed up and showed out against UNLV. And once again, they do everything right, and they do it the right way. They're fundamentally sound. They make plays when they need to, and they don't commit the dumb penalties. UNLV did not do any of those things, and that was the difference, once again, in last Friday's game.
Okay. So I'm going to open it up. I'm apologizing ahead of time. I'm going to open it up to Greg Rector and anyone else.
What? Just because I told him last week that the Boise State Broncos would beat the UNLV Running Rebels, I was correct. And I don't care whether it was by 1 point, 5 points, or 15 points. The Broncos beat the UNLV Running Rebels. That's the end of the story there. I mean, that's it. And it was an enjoyable game. Ashton Genty did not have a Heisman Award type of a night. The UNLV Running Rebels did stop him from running the football quite nicely. But again, as Brock said, that held open the play action game for the Broncos, and that's where they ended up beating the UNLV Running Rebels.
Okay. So I'm going to, in the interest of fairness, give Brock a chance to respond. So you've heard the words of your challenger. The game was, despite the mistakes you talked about, despite sluggishness on offense, still a very, very, very close and hard-fought affair. Tell me about some of the things that you believe. I'm assuming these things are things you believe to be fixable, I guess is what I'm saying. This is something that, okay. So what do you think it would take, either from a talent or schematic standpoint, or would it take something from the talent or schematic standpoint to close the gap between the two programs, Brock?
Yeah, I think it's all schematics, honestly. I think the talent level is fairly close. Definitely the edge is to Boise State without a doubt. But UNLV definitely needs to get a better pass rush in there. And that's where you can definitely start talking about some of the talent on the defensive line. But overall, UNLV had multiple opportunities to win that game. There's no other way to say it, and they threw it away time and time again through dumb penalties. They need to clean that up. I believe John St. John, their left tackle, it was a very questionable one, but you just can't do it. Had it after the play, unnecessary reference call on him. UNLV, once again, as I mentioned, had a late hit on a bounce, ended up leading to a Boise State touchdown, multiple holding calls on big runs. And then the thing that I didn't talk about, but something that I definitely want to touch on, is that UNLV had multiple drives that ended up in the red zone, even within the Boise State's 8-yard line, that did not result in touchdowns on multiple occasions. You can even go back to the first drive of the game where Heisman League Williams had a speed option, which he took to I believe the Boise State 2-yard line, but through a variety of lack of talent, but more importantly, lack of proper play calling, they just didn't punch it in. And there's 2 drives in particular that you can point to where, had they taken touchdowns instead of field goals, UNLV runs away with this game. It's not even close. Credit to Boise State for making a stop defensively, because once again they did everything right. But if you can just clean that up, the game's in the bag for the Rebels. So I think definitely we're going to see a different UNLV team in about a week or so, because on the bye tomorrow. So when they go out to Hawaii, I think you'll see a very, very, very aggressive team. And this is going to be a team that's hungry, they're hurt, and they really want to make a statement, especially on this last stretch of the season, because they do have only a limited number of games left, and they're going to need a little bit of help if they want to compete for both the Mountain West and the automatic non-qualifier. It's looking very difficult that they're going to make the college football playoffs. They'll need a lot of things to fall their way. One of those things would then have to win out. They would also need Colorado State, who I believe is currently undefeated in the Mountain West, to lose because they don't play them this year. And then they would be able to face Boise in the Mountain West Championship game. But in that scenario, they have to play in Boise, Idaho, which makes things incredibly tougher. With that being said, you also have a Tulane team that blew out Charlotte last night that is burgeoning. They only have 2 losses on the season. And they're a team that could really make some noise when it comes to that non-Power 5 bid. So they would need them to at least lose one more game. However, if Tulane can lose one more game and things start working out in conference, they could have a winner-take-all game against Boise State in Boise come November. I think that's going to be something that could be legacy-defining for Barry Odom and the Rebels.
Okay. I'm going to open it back up for questions, commentary, etc. from the panel, including, of course, Greg.
Oh, I have no other questions for the UNLV Running Rebels at this point in time. Boise State is a top 15 member of the country for a reason, and it's because they are a damn good program. That's the bottom line here. And again, I'll remind all of you NFL draft fanatics out there that Ashton Genty belongs to the Dallas Cowboys. Don't anybody touch that man before the Cowboys do. It's the bottom. No, that's That's it. That's it.
The two
Okay.
shiftiest running backs in the previous 4 years, you can say, is what Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs, and both of them went inside the top 12. So I think the Cowboys got to lose a lot more games if they want to put their hands in
Oh,
Jets.
but don't worry. We don't have a defense. We don't have any defense. We're getting our butts whipped on Sunday by Atlanta. The following week, we're gonna get our butts kicked by the Philadelphia Eagles. It's happening. It's over. It's over. It's over.
Yeah, no, Gentry would definitely. I mean, you just want to talk about fits, right? Gentry would be a perfect fit on the Dallas Cowboys as long as they can tighten up the left tackle position, which obviously Guyton is rookie, and that's neither here nor there. But when you talk about a player that can really elevate an offense, it's exactly what Ashton Gentry is. As we mentioned with Boise State, their entire offense obviously runs through him, but the things that they can run because of him, the effectiveness of play action, bootlegs, hitting the tight end in multiple spots up and down the field was definitely a critical reason for their success. So you just add that to the NFL level with NFL players. I think that no matter where he goes to, he's definitely going to elevate whatever offense he's on, and more importantly, he's going to open up the pass game for whatever team he goes to. And that would definitely be a welcome sight for the Dallas Cowboys if he does end up in Texas.
Yeah, and the mock drafts do show him going quite often to the Dallas Cowboys.
I understand, but I think you'd be hard pressed to find out when Gentry goes out the ball in top 5. I think he's a top 5 level player. I think that potentially a cornerback or left tackle could drop just because that's how good he is. Now, obviously, running back positions is the position that's valued in these past several years. But you start looking at the contracts you see in the NFL with Aaron Jones and Josh Jacobs, and there's a variety of examples up and down the list. Though,
yeah,
running back position is becoming very much valued again. I think that's why you might see Ashton Gentry's draft stock jump even higher than already expected.
No, that's possible. But the teams the teams who are drafting that highly, they all need quarterbacks, and we know that they're all going to be hunting for a quarterback early on. So if the Cowboys finish at that 8 or 9 spot, that should be just about fine.
I would agree with you as well. I just think that when you have championship contending teams right now on both sides of the conference that are so close to really punching through, Gentry is the type of player that it would not be surprising to see a team trade a fair amount. I'm not talking about Ricky Williams-esque capital. No, nothing like that. But a team that would be willing to trade a fair amount of draft capital for him. I think he's that great of a player. I think just the fact that he's so shifty that he avoids those big hits is definitely something that has been a big plus for him as well. I think the only concern is the threat on his tires, because Boise State does use him a fair amount, but I don't think that's too much of a concern as it would have been in years past.
Well, before we move on from that game, so the sailing is smooth-ish. Well, I mentioned obviously the San Diego State game, which is, like I said, I won't go as far as say a trap game, but I believe they'll show up ready. But they definitely need to exercise some caution.
Yes.
If there is sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say last week San Diego State had Washington State. They took them to the wire, and honestly, they should have won. So don't take anything away from San Diego State. I got an opportunity to speak to Sean Lewis this offseason during Mountain West Media Day, and he had all positive things to say about his team. I think you're starting to finally see the Aztecs put together in terms of being able to execute game plan at a high level. I believe that they have one of the more underrated offenses in the Mountain West. I think you're really starting to see them come together. And with a Sean Lewis offense, what we saw at Colorado and at Penn State is that when they're on, they can move the ball very quickly. So for Boise State, this is going to be a game where if you get hit a chin, how are you going to respond? And that's what I'm very curious about when we watch this game later on tonight.
And before we close out that part of that segment, for UNLV, is there any other game on the schedule that you think is deserving of some extra time and attention when you look at how the rest of the season plays out?
Not necessarily. It's a very winnable schedule for UNLV coming down the stretch. Obviously, they go to Hawaii next week, whose only FBS win on the season is against Nevada, Reno. And then UNLV also plays Reno to end the season, battle for the Fremont Cannon. Looking at their schedule, kind of going ahead, I just got to pull it up to refresh myself. San Diego State, they play at home, which might be a bit concerning, but I think the real trap game for them is going to be San Jose State. They played San Jose State last year and they lost at home. They have to travel to California for this game, and San Jose State is running a very explosive offense where if UNLV gets caught sleeping early, they could easily be down 14-0 in the blink of an eye to the Spartans. So I think San Jose State is the only one I have any concerns about, but I think that UNLV should be able to win out the rest of the schedule, finish the season at 10-2. Again, whatever happens with Colorado State, that's going to determine if they're able to go to the Mountain West Championship game or not.
Well, Trell Capers just caught a touchdown pass for the Boise State Broncos, and they are up 7-0.
Well, that helps the argument that Boise State deserves to be right, the non-automatic qualifier. I mean, when your only loss is to Eugene by 3, hell, you probably, depending on obviously what happens this weekend, which we'll talk about later, they might be the second best team in the country.
We talked about that game, Brock, because you and I did that first, the last word when that game happened. And what did we both say about this Oregon Ducks team? They got very, very lucky.
Very lucky.
Very lucky.
And that kind of adds to Boise State's kind of mystique, because at first I thought that was more an issue at Oregon than it was Boise. But then you start seeing their performances this year, especially the Big Ten, especially the victory against Ohio State. They have put it together. So I think that's more of a credit to Boise State, which, in my opinion, I think Boise State deserves to be a top 10 ranked team in the country. I know it sounds kind of hypocritical of me because I don't have them in my top 10 right now. Unfortunately, that's just because there's so many teams that are undefeated and only have one loss that it's hard to put them in. But after the weekend that we have coming up, especially with teams like BYU and Iowa State and potentially, the SEC this weekend, I think that it would not be shocking should Boise State win comfortably against San Diego tonight to see them in the top 10 next week. And for a guy that started watching college football like me in 2006, this is where I'm usually used to seeing Boise State, and in my opinion, where the program belongs. College football is good and it's better when Boise State is good. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens.
The orange and blue was played quite proudly and loudly at UNLV by the Broncos. So I mean that's the end of that discussion here. What about Texas and A&M and South Carolina tomorrow, Brock?
Oh, I'm very curious about this game because South Carolina is a team that's put multiple programs on upset alert throughout the season. They blew out Oklahoma. Obviously, they took Alabama to the wire, Tuscaloosa. They probably should have beat LSU when they played them earlier this season. But I think that Texas A&M I think Texas A&M wins this one fairly comfortably. I think the only thing that we really need to watch out for is what's happening with the quarterback situation for the Aggies. Obviously, they pulled Weidman last week, brought in Marcel Reed, and Reed was able to punch in for 3 touchdowns in the second half. Le'Veon Moss continues to impress me. He's one of the more premier running backs in the entire country, and Mike Elko's defense has them rolling at an extremely high level. With all those words being said, A&M is due to pull an A&M-esque action, right? And that's to lose the most random game on the schedule. So it wouldn't be surprising for me to see the Aggies drop it to South Carolina, but I don't see it happening this one. I think that there's multiple big games coming up for the Aggies, and that's where they'll get their losses. I think they won't finish the season undefeated, but honestly, it would not surprise me to see them in Athens at the end of the season. I think they're playing at a very high level right now. I think playing Notre Dame to start the season definitely helped them taking that loss early. It really helped them focus and reprioritize what they need to fix. And they definitely done a great job as a coaching staff and as a program addressing those issues. And once again, Mike Elko remains one of the premier coaches in the country. What he did at Duke in his first year is remarkable. What he did with Riley Leonard is remarkable. And what he's doing back at A&M continues to be very, very remarkable. So
do you see Texas A&M actually beating Texas this year?
I do actually. I think that Texas at times has shown that when they go up against a tough, well-coached defense, they struggle. And that's been a kind of a theme throughout Sarkisian's entire head coaching career. I'm not trying to harp on things that I've been talking about for the past 3 years because he did start to fix those issues last year, and he's done a great job since. But there's always that kind of lingering doubt where they start to get it done in the crunch time against high-quality opponents. I think the Georgia game was a major eye-opener for Longhorns fans. Like, This is SEC football, not Mississippi State, right? And obviously, I take it to the limit last week against Vanderbilt, which is very conservative for Longhorns. Vanderbilt obviously has done a great job this season, but let's not take the piss here. They're still Vanderbilt, and they've been on a slide since they had their couple big wins a couple weeks ago. So I think that actually I have A&M favored in this matchup at current moment. Obviously, things can change, but if they gain enough pressure on Ewers, I think they can get a couple turnovers, and don't be surprised if A&M is able to, they back to those Jackie Sherrill days where they get down, they get dirty, and they wind the clock down, and they take advantage of their opportunities, and they get one of those gritty victories up.
Yep.
So everyone, we are joined by the man who currently, but if this goes well, if this segment goes well, he will go from being closely ranked number 2 as our FOTS friend of the show. He will pull into an actual head-to-head, flat-footed tie with Donovan James if the segment goes well. His ranking will, if this goes well, he will be right there. He was close before. If this segment goes well, he will be our number 1 tie for the number 1 ranked friend of the show. We're joined by the one, the only, Josh Keatly.
Hey, no one can beat Donovan. Donovan is a good luck charm. Okay, he left and he went to the Indiana. He's with he's covering Indiana Hoosiers now, and now they're undefeated. Yep. Like the dude is a good luck charm. Everywhere he goes, victories follow. So no one can beat old Donovan.
And I would like to add to that statement. Once Donovan left Trojans Wire, the USC went absolutely downhill.
That's so true.
We found the root of the problem.
Exactly. Hire Donovan James if you want your program to be successful.
Lincoln Riley, you've heard the man. Time to at least bring him on as some sort of advisor. So this is a big, giant, huge, giant honking week for a bunch of programs, but no program more than it is for the Ohio State University. They are going against. Obviously, Penn State hasn't beaten them when they're both
Nittany Lions, yes, who have not beaten Ohio State in several years. But guess what? Tomorrow that changes. I'm sorry, Josh.
Several years is kind of an understatement. Let's not.
The last time they played when both teams were ranked and Penn State won was 2008, I believe. So it's been a minute.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Well, the matter of fact, the last time they played up in Happy Valley, what was it, 2016? Is that right? And then Penn State was actually winning, and then Ohio State scored like 28 points in the fourth quarter. I mean, they scored an insane amount of points to just finish them off. Big game James. He's the only. He is the poor man's Ryan Day. Really, is the best way to describe James Franklin. He's the only reason Ryan Day still has a job. If we're being honest. You know what I mean? Like you see those graphs that pop up, like the number of Ryan Day's record in big games. The only wins are against Clemson his first season. Notre Dame, who went on to lose 4 games that year. No one talks about that they went on to lose. Why they still count that ranking, I don't know. And Penn State, who, James Franklin can't beat Ohio State or Michigan. So this is a huge game for Ryan Day because, he has to continue to dominate James Franklin or else these voices are going to get louder.
Yeah, I definitely. I was just gonna say, I definitely agree with you, Josh, on that. But in the same way, one, I think you call a poor man's Ryan Day, considering he has one of the biggest contracts I've ever seen in my life. Don't know why, but that's neither here nor there. Secondly, Penn State definitely got screwed a couple years ago, maybe more like several years ago, when they put Ohio State into the college football playoffs over Penn State. I believe that year was that the year that Ohio State got blanked by Clemson. I forget, but more importantly,
yes. No, it was. You're right.
No, that was a year.
That was a year. Okay, so I also want to add that I think the last time Ohio State played Penn State in Happy Valley, JTT covered the spread, so love you forever. But also became a manimal amongst boys in that game. I think a first fumble, strip sack, interception, return for a touchdown. I'm not mistaken. Multiple tackles. So that's gonna be, I think, one of the big things I would like to hear you talk about a little bit is. JT always turns up against Penn State for some reason. Do you believe that he's going to do it again and have another vintage performance?
I hope so, man. He's had a very up and down season. He played. I thought he played very well this last game. I think that, man, it's you're opening up Pandora's box talking about this Ohio State defense. Jim Knowles was a bad hire. Their defense is not designed to play in the Big Ten. Their defense is designed to get drives. I don't know what he doesn't let these defensive ends, these pass rushers go. As you guys are aware, anybody that's connected to the Ohio State program, follows the Ohio State program, knows that Larry Johnson and Jim Knowles have been ever since they got there. First, it was about that stupid jack position that Jim Knowles wanted to have here. That again, it can work. I don't want to act like what he can't work at Ohio State. It's just why he does it doesn't translate. He was doing it at Oklahoma State because he couldn't recruit pure defensive ends. I mean, he was recruiting guys that were a little undersized but speedier, so we're going to give him some space. Yeah. You don't have to do that at Ohio State. So when they moved Jack Sawyer, who's built like an NFL defensive end, to Jack, it made no sense. You just gave him more ground to chase. It didn't make any sense. And finally, Larry Johnson and Ryan Day kind of beat some sense into him, or Michigan beat some sense into him, and they got rid of that jack position. But you still see it like. Last game I was talking about on the Ohio State of my podcast, the game against Nebraska was the first game this year where I saw either defensive end, anybody on the defensive line utilize a spin move. Why? Why do they do that? I think that there's something that they're not allowed to just pin their ears back and go. Like they're playing more contained than they are pass rushing. So I think that that's really the issue. I still think this is the most talented defensive line, two deep wise in the country. They're just they're being underutilized, and they're not allowed to do certain things. And it's very, very strange. And you can't tell me that that's wrong, because these guys will make splash plays. Jack, that was the game you're describing was 2 years ago. JTT hasn't gotten worse. Right? This defense limits what these defensive ends are allowed to do. So hopefully last week was a sign. I think getting beat by Oregon and seeing that, all these stats were popping out that like against, the 7 losses that they've had the last couple of years, or since Jim Knowles has been there, the losses that they've had, they've accumulated like 1 sack in all those losses. So I'm sure that there was a conversation that took place, and the defense looked a lot better last week. They were doing a little bit more stunts. Like I said, I saw some spin moves, and it seems like a really trivial thing to point out, but it's not. It's not. When you go, when we watched Ohio State was playing Marshall, the defensive end that Marshall had, you guys will remember his name. I don't. He's going to be an early round NFL pick. He was spin moving that was his main move, and everybody in the press box was going, "Ooh, wow!" And it's like we don't do that. And it's not that those guys aren't capable of doing that. So hopefully. Last week was a precursor to what we get to see pass rushing wise and defensively for Ohio State, because I do not think that the defense was the issue last week. It was the issue 2 weeks ago. But again, I don't think it's an issue of talent.
Okay.
And that reminds me of how the school up north plays their defensive line, where they're hesitant to actually attack the quarterback off the hop. And that's what I've seen from the Ohio State Buckeyes, is the same thing. Well, I don't understand that philosophy. It boggles my mind.
Makes no sense. It makes sense if you're playing in certain situations. It would make sense. And I completely understand why that worked at Oklahoma State. Although, when we go back, Brock, you and I talked about this pretty in depth during the offseason when you were on our podcast. Yeah. We talked about his resume, and he had like 1 good year at Oklahoma State. The rest was kind of just really average. In a lot of the quarterbacks that they faced, it makes more sense, right? You played a lot of scrambling quarterbacks, a lot of quarterbacks that ran around. You're not really seeing that a whole lot in the Big Ten. Dylan Gabriel doesn't run. I mean, he ran twice, and they were huge chunk plays. I understand that, but that's not his go-to. Pin your ears back. Let's go. You know what I mean? The defensive backs are covering these guys for too long. And then it's a weird defense. And then he wants to do this weird thing where he wants to give these defensive backs that are super physical, Denzel Burke, David Signosin, and he wants to give them an insane amount of cushion. And then he doesn't want to give them any help over the top. It's very strange. So you're seeing guys like Evan Stewart get 10, they're basically just getting a free roam to spurt right past you. I mean, I don't blame Denzel. I blame Denzel Burke a little bit because it was ugly, but I mean, I don't think that people were calling for his head to be benched and stuff. I wouldn't do that. It's happening because the scheme is awful. It makes no sense. Like, he doesn't do that against anybody else because he usually has the speed to keep up with those guys, and they don't make any adjustments. But I again, my defensive rant is over. I think they played a lot better last week. We saw, Ohio State had like 3 pass interference penalties because they were being more aggressive. They were lining up a little bit closer. So hopefully that's we get to see more of that against Penn State.
I want to mention back, we had you on preseason, and I asked you about which positions you felt best about, which positions you were most concerned about. You said that despite the loss of talent at wide receiver, you'd be fine at wide receiver. You were right. You mentioned you weren't super sold on some of the tight ends, but you thought somebody would emerge. I can't remember. There were like 2 names. Yeah, there were 2 names I think you mentioned. One of whom was like more of a raw sort of developmental guy. The other one was a little more further down the road, but I can't remember the names you threw out there. But I'll come back to
Jelani Thurman was the hot shot 4-star freshman that looks like a Greek god, a black Greek god. Like, and then you had I thought he was
Greek god. So I just want to say that again for all those people listening. A black Greek god. Wow, he said that.
He looks like David Njoku's little brother. So I thought that he was going to explode. I was wrong. I don't think that's an indicator of him being bad or not. I think it's just more he's just not ready. And then the other guy was G. Scott, who was a former 4-star who was a wide receiver that moved down to tight end. He's had a very up and down season. And then they got a transfer from Ohio, which was they did not get him when we recorded the show. Will Kazmarek, who's kind of been a blocking specialist. He was the one that caught that 50-50 ball against Oregon that maybe not have been so 50-50. But he's hurt, so I don't know if we're ever going to see much of him. Well, he played last week, so. But none of those guys have stepped up, no.
Right. You felt really good about the running backs for reasons that I guess are pretty clear and easy to understand. You seemed hopeful but unsure about the quarterback situation. And you liked most of the offensive line, but you mentioned 1 or 2 places where you thought the depth was maybe not exactly ideal. Looking back at what you talked about before the first time we had you on preseason and where the things are now, how do you feel like the position groups that we discussed, the team's roster as a whole is sort of panned out? And what if you knew now, if you know then what you knew now, or how you would put it, what things would you now say going into the season that you would want to see altered, changed, bolstered, fixed, whatever term you want to use?
The offensive line, man. I don't know what they're doing. They're ill prepared. There was enough pieces. So I stand by what I said. The starting 5 for Ohio State was great. And then you had an awesome 6th man in Carson Hinsman that theoretically he was the starting center last year. So theoretically you could plug and play him at center, plug and play him at guard. If a offensive tackle gets hurt, my thought process is you move Donovan Jackson out to tackle, move Carson Hinsman to guard. Hey, okie dokie. And then something even better happened at the beginning of the year. I shouldn't say better, but another doorway opened up because Donovan Jackson missed the first couple games. So they went with Austin Sareveld, who is a sophomore, a big, highly recruited kid, 4-star guy that was on the apparatus. No one really talked about, and he played great. He played great. He played so good that there was a discussion that once Donovan Jackson comes back, maybe Austin Sareveld should take over for Tegra Shabola. Because Tegra Shabola also has been playing above average, but there were some issues clearly at the beginning of the season. We don't see those issues anymore. Both those guys played great. Donovan Jackson came back healthy. Josh Simmons definitely took a step up, plays like an All-American. NFL scouts in the press box are telling me he's a first-round pick, maybe even the first offensive tackle off the board. I'm thinking, wow, that's crazy. Seth McLaughlin is everything Ohio State wanted and more. No snapping issues. I'm happy. Offensive line looks great. Offensive line's creating holes. Running backs are hitting it hard. Awesome. Well, Josh Simmons gets hurt against Oregon. Okay. He's out for the year. All right, well, this shouldn't be an issue. So what they did is they put Zen Mikulski out there. Zen Mikulski's another former 4-star recruit. Okay, biting my nails a little bit. because he's not Josh Simmons. Josh Simmons is an All-American level tackle. I don't care how highly of a recruit you are. That's a hard task against Oregon in the away environment to go in there. You're losing. They're trying to come back, yada, yada, yada. He played great. Okay, cool. No worries at all. This guy played great. Josh Simmons is out for the year, but that's okay. Let's not panic. You get a bye week. So you get theoretically 2 weeks to prepare for Nebraska and figure out your offensive line situation. Maybe you don't want to leave Zen out there. Maybe you want to move Donovan Jackson, a left tackle, move Zen to guard. Maybe you want to do one of those plan B or plan C that we talked about. So they rolled into Nebraska. Zen started at left tackle, and he got railroaded every single play. I defy you to find me 3 plays that he played well. They don't exist. Then he gets hurt. Okay, so they bump Donovan Jackson out, and they put in Luke Montgomery at left guard. Okay, Luke Montgomery is another 4-star, 5-star kid from Findlay, Ohio. He was extremely athletic kid. He played on like Bronny James Jr.'s AAU team, was like the second leading scorer for like 12 years or something. The guy's got footwork. He's athletic, yada, yada, yada. But he's been practicing a center. Well, that's weird. He was practicing a center, and then when Donovan Jackson was hurt, Austin Cerebral was playing. Carson Heinzman started last year. Okay. Well, Luke Montgomery goes out there. The offensive line looks terrible. They're not getting to push. Even Donovan Jackson's not looking good. They couldn't run. I think Ohio State averaged 2 yards per carry against Nebraska. If you take away Travion Henderson had a big chunk run. I think he might have 2 chunk runs that were over 15 yards. That kind of skewed the stats. But if you look at the meat of the averages, it was like 2 yards, 2.5 yards, 3 yards. That's not good. That's not acceptable for 2 running backs that I sat here and said that they were All-American caliber. I'm scared. I'm really scared. I was wrong. I thought that there would be talent waiting in the wings. And I still think that there is, but the coaching staff is butchering it. They're butchering it. I was team Justin Fry. Mike Chen, who's my co-host on the Ohio State Mind podcast, he hates Justin Fry. He's wanted Justin Fry to be fired for a long time. And I've always been kind of like, chill out. A lot of the things you're blaming are not his fault. Dude, what's going on? What they're doing doesn't make any sense. It's very scary, especially when you're playing Penn State, who maybe has the most talented defensive line in the Big Ten, other than Ohio State, maybe even more talented because they let their guys go free. Abdul Carter is insane. I was going to be worried about Simmons or Fryer blocking them on their own, let alone a backup, let alone Donovan Jackson moving out to tackle for the first time this season. Offensive line is definitely my scare. That's definitely my scare. I'm also really upset about the lack of development at tight end. I talked about Jelani Thurman. Jelani Thurman doesn't see the field. He saw the field early on in the season, had a really nasty drop in the end zone, and he was we haven't really seen him since. G. Scott Jr. hasn't gotten any better at all since he's gotten on campus. And I don't know how that's possible. And I don't really even blame him. Something's going on there. There's a lack of development there that makes them that needs to be investigated. I don't, whether the tight ends coach needs to be fired or reevaluated. I don't know what's happening there, but those guys they're not great blockers. They're not great receivers. What do you do? What do they do? I don't know what they're contributing. So those are definitely my 2 biggest concerns. Ohio State fans are really shit on Will Howard. I don't know why. As you said, I was kind of, I don't want to say low on Will Howard at the beginning of the year, but he was not the guy I wanted, right? I was more of a Cam Ward guy, which I understand why they didn't get him. Even Will Rogers, I think I even was like, Will Rogers is way more accurate. He's the anti-McCord. Let's go with that. But Will Howard's been great. I have no complaints about Will Howard. I got these, people were telling me he doesn't have passion, he doesn't have fire. That's what this offense is missing. No, the offense is missing the same thing it's always been missing since Ryan Day's been there. Okay, what are you gonna tell me? CJ Stroud didn't have passion and fire. He's got it now. We can't keep blaming the quarterback. So I really don't know what everybody's saying. Okay, yeah, he does. Does he have the strongest arm in college football? No, but you can still win a lot of games with someone who's got an above average arm. You know what I mean? He can't throw it 70 yards in the air like Aaron Rodgers. He's still got he threw a beautiful 40-yard pass to Carnell Tate last week. And he does that on a fairly regular, consistent basis. So it's people, these Ryan Day honks are so, they're making excuses, and it's crazy. How many quarterbacks are we going to blame? And it's weird because Will Howard I think he's played great. I think he said the right things in press conferences. I mean, he's yelling at reporters. He seems passionate to me.
All right. Well, I'm going to open it up to the rest of the panel for questions of the one, the only Josh Keatly, who, of course, based on how things are going, has a very good chance to be in a full-on, flat-footed tie for the number one rankings for the FOTS. Friends of the show. Greg, what questions?
My question is for the defense of the Ohio State Buckeyes, and especially, as you said, how they're giving up soft coverage. Drew Aller and the younger sophomore quarterback who played last week against Wisconsin both can throw the football down that field. Andy Koltanicki has been a lifesaver for Drew Aller. Bottom line, how does the Buckeyes secondary face Tyler Warren and those receivers?
So I'm actually not worried about that part of the game at all. Koltanicki's he's the best offensive coordinator Penn State's had, and I don't know, I don't want to say my lifetime, but in a long time. And Drew Aller,
I'm old. I'm old. Okay, I'm pushing almost 60 here. He is one of the finest offensive coordinators State has ever had. Period. Bottom line. Okay.
And I don't think that's. Yeah, I don't think that's an exaggeration either. Like he does a lot of unique things. He can really frustrate a defense, and I fully anticipate that being the deal on Saturday too. But the thing about the passing game, and I like Drew Aller. We did our Big Ten quarterback rankings, and everybody had Dylan Gabriel as the number one quarterback. I did not. I had Drew Aller. He's big. I saw him. Some of that's biased. He went to high school in Ohio. I saw him. So I can admit that. But he does a lot of, I like what he does, and he's more athletic than a lot of people think. But I think that he elevates his receivers. The thing about the Ohio State defensive backs aren't bad. Are they elite? No. But Denzel Burke is a fringe first rounder. Davis Ignosin is a fringe first rounder. Lathan Ransom wasn't healthy last week, and they moved Jordan Hancock, who's a fringe or top 3 round nickelback, to safety, where he was a little uncomfortable. You could see that. You could see that on film. Lathan Ransom should. We're gonna see if he's gonna be back. We're gonna see if he plays. We're gonna see if Jordan Hancock's another week more comfortable. Caleb Downs, I don't have to talk about him, right? We know how great he is. Oregon was just the kind of speed that they had at all 3 receivers and their tight end was just something that they were just so unprepared for that it really upsets me. Like, I don't know how you can watch Oregon football and not be prepared for that kind of speed, but they weren't. Penn State doesn't have that. Harrison Wallace is solid. Julian Fleming's like their number 2 receiver, and Julian Fleming would be like the number 4 at Ohio State. I mean, he transferred from Ohio State for a reason, and I love Julian Fleming. I was devastated when he left. You can listen to the podcast, because my big thing about the receiving corps in the offseason was I don't know if there's going to be experience. There's a lot of talent. There's not a lot of experience. I was wrong. We don't need him, and he really hasn't done a whole lot for Penn State either. He's the same old Julian Fleming. Tyler Warren, I think, is really good. He's a really good tight end. Is he a really talented, athletic, nasty tight end like Luke Lachey or Ferguson at Oregon?
Nope.
Or Colson level? No, I don't think so either. I think it's kind of like we want to throw the ball. Kodalinki's really good at throwing the ball, moving the ball forward. He's kind of like, okay, you're the guy by default, basically. I'm not. A lot of people have been asking me about Warren, like he's the best tight end in the Big Ten, and that's not true. I'm far more concerned if they play like they did last week. I'm not worried about the receivers at all. I would be worried about the tight end a little bit, because you would think that what's going to be responsible. Ferguson tore them up when they were playing Oregon, but he tore them up not because of the defensive backs, but because Cody Simon and Sonny Styles were getting lost in coverage. That's my concern. Yes, I'm more concerned about the linebackers losing track of the tight end, not because he's so nasty and he's Rob Gronkowski, just because they get lost. And I'm also concerned. I'm more concerned about their run game, because this Penn State running game is going to be the best run game that they've seen by a long shot. And it's not just because their running backs, it's not just because they have 2 running backs that are extremely talented. It's because they have purpose when they block. Everything is schemed in a way where, Singleton shouldn't have to bump things outside. A lot of the design things work. He gets to the second level and he's gone. And these linebackers don't do a good job of filling. They don't. That's the weakness of the Ohio State defense, is that Cody Simon is an average linebacker. He's a notch below Tommy Eichenberg, but maybe in the same tier as Tommy Eichenberg. I don't think so. And he's the best linebacker. I mean, CJ Hicks, they benched because the dude can't read a playbook. He's a really good pass rusher, great blitzer, but he gets lost all the time. Sonny Styles isn't a linebacker. He's not. And I want to be very clear. Last week, Cody Simon and Sonny Styles had their best games at linebacker. So maybe that was the turning point. I don't think that's likely, though. I think it's just more likely that Nebraska didn't have the firepower to take advantage of the linebackers. But that's the big weakness. And Arvell Reese is still a true freshman.
You look at teams all across this country, then the linebacking position this year is absolutely horrifying from top to bottom in this country. I mean, the linebackers are terrible.
Yeah.
So
it shouldn't cause them to lose the game. I fully think Ohio State wins the game. But I do think, like, when you watch, it's hard to watch the Ohio State linebackers and say something like that or feel that way when I watched Iowa's linebackers. And it's like, God damn, why, all those guys, Ohio State didn't offer any of those guys. Ohio State had no interest in any of those Iowa linebackers, and they're all better. They're rotating in. Their fourth linebacker would be the number one linebacker at Ohio State, not because he's bigger, not because he's faster. It's because he fills the hole. He fills the gap. He reads and reacts. I think Sonny Styles had one game where he had like 15 tackles, and people were messaging me because it was a bad game. He had a bad game. And they're like, how can you say that he was the leading tackler? When all of your tackles are 6 yards beyond the line of scrimmage, that's not good. That's not a good game, right? It's good that he made those tackles and they weren't touchdowns, but it's not ideal, right? There's no different than the safety making a tackle. So if Penn State's going to win, that's how they're going to win. The running game is just going to destroy these linebackers, and maybe Warren gets a couple passes in the flats. I think Singleton in the passing game is dangerous too.
Singleton in that red zone is very special as well, out of the backfield as a receiver, as you saw. Yeah, he is very, very good out of the back. Yeah,
Brock, what questions do you have for our? I can almost hear his ranking increasing as we continue on the show. That last little mini data dump you just did was magnificent. Oh, Donovan, check your rearview mirrors, buddy. Check your rearview mirrors. Okay, so. Brock, what questions do you have for the one, the only Mr. Joshua Keatly?
I guess I have to start out with the topic that Josh and I have been talking about for down there 2 years now. Regardless of the result of today, and obviously that's going to change a lot of things of the game. That's going to change a lot of things. What does Ryan Day's future at Ohio State look like?
So I want to be clear, Brock. I'm with you. I'm team Fire Day now. You and I talked after the season last year, and I was like, all right, Brock, I'm with you. Fire him. But I do want to be I was not like that for 2 years. So you were on the ship before me. You were on the bus before me. Yes. I'm with you on the I joined you after
Brock
the Michigan
almost
game.
Always the first one to fire the coach bus. He drives to fire the coach bus, in fact.
But I am on that. I am in the passenger seat. I would join that bus. I jumped on the bus after the Michigan game last year. So I think I've always said this. I said this at the beginning of the year. I want to be very clear. And that's an important part of when you're evaluating these coaches is that you can't move the goalpost. Have your expectations. Did they meet it? Did they not meet it? He's got to win the Big Ten. And I said it after they lost to Oregon. I was very upset. It was a lot of people commented on that podcast about how upset I was. And I never said to fire him midseason. I would never do that. It's Ohio State. And Ryan Day's not a bad coach. I've never called him a bad coach. Just but when you look at the best coaches in Ohio State history, Urban Meyer, Jim Tressel, Woody Hayes, those guys were head coaches at smaller places first, right? Urban, Bowling Green, Utah, Florida. Jim Tressel, Youngstown State, right? Woody Hayes,
Miami.
Uh-oh.
You got me?
We got you back.
Yeah, you're back. You're good.
But he didn't have that chance to grow. He immediately, so you have everything he does, you kind of have to take with it was a bad fit. I think that there's a chance that he could go to somewhere, go down to Marshall, have a really successful career there, come back up, win a national championship with somewhere else. I still think it's highly unlikely because he's the one that doesn't have the fire. He's the one that doesn't have the passion, right? I've been covering Ohio State for not a whole long time, not a long time, but I was at Ohio State when Urban was there. I was associated with the football program when Urban was there, and that guy was a dick. All those stories are true. That guy's a dick. Ryan Day's not. Ryan Day's one of the nicest people you ever meet. That might be one of James Franklin's problems too, because James Franklin is one of the only head coaches when I go to these games and I'm sitting there on the sidelines pre-game taking photos like a dummy. He'll stop and talk to me. Like, nice guys do. Why are you doing that? You're the head coach of Penn State. Don't talk to me. Go, give me a dirty look because I'm in your way and move on. You know what I mean? Like, and I think these great coaches, they just have that constant chip on their shoulder where they hate everybody. And Ryan Day just doesn't have that. I think but I want to be clear. I don't want to ever move the goalpost. He needs to win the Big Ten. He has to win the Big Ten. They're going to get in the playoffs. Ohio State's Ohio State. If they're 9-3 and a team like North Carolina State is 10-2, Ohio State's still getting in, right? There's going to be one ACC team. There's going to be one Big 12 team and one Group of 5 team. And the rest is going to be Big 10 in the SEC. They're going to shove as many as they can if possible. It doesn't mean that Ohio State was good. Right? Just like Ohio State made the playoffs. They didn't even make it to their Big Ten championship. They weren't even good enough to qualify for the Big Ten championship, and they made a 4-team playoff, right? So it's very important that we don't put a whole lot of stock in the playoffs. Plus, unless he wins it all, but I don't think that's going to happen either. My big worry is that they're going to lose. They're not even going to make the Big Ten championship. He's going to go to the playoffs. He's going to win one game. And everybody's going to be like, well, he was close. Just kind of like they do with the Georgia game. And it's like, no, he wasn't close. He had the best quarterback in Ohio State history in C.J. Stroud and one of the best wide receivers in Ohio State history, Marvin Harrison. And they never beat Michigan, and they never won the Big Ten. Why are we staring at a Georgia loss like some kind of moral high mark? It's just that's my worry. So he's got to win the Big Ten. He's got to win the Big Ten. Maybe if he makes an appearance and makes a deep run in the playoffs, I change my mind. But right now, I'm really confident that I want to see a Big Ten win. Big Ten championship. And he's got the roster to do it.
So I guess that kind of leads to my next question, which is, I think regardless of what happens this season, it's going to be very hard for Ohio State to move on from Ryan Day internally. I mean, not for me. That's very easy for me, but that's not the point. Could we potentially see a coup where Chip Kelly gets elevated to head coach at the end of the season?
No, Chip Kelly doesn't want to be a head coach at all. Chip Kelly doesn't want to be a head coach at all, which I respect. Chip Kelly called the worst game I've seen him coach so far in all of 7 games I know. But his worst game he's coached was against Nebraska. Everything else I think was pretty much chef's kiss. Even against Oregon, it's really hard to nitpick the play calling he did against Oregon. That was, again, pretty much 100% on the defense. And that's kind of where he's comfortable. I've talked to a couple people that were associated with Chip back at UCLA. And he doesn't – the NIL thing, he's already not like a huge recruiter. He's already not really wanting to go out. He's not a big kissing babies guy. And when the NIL situation occurred, they were asking him to do more than that. And he's like, I'm not doing this. I'm out. At a place like Ohio State, you kind of have to do that stuff now, right? Ryan Day is very much in the public eye. He's signing autographs. He's doing weekly dinners and stuff like that. Chip Kelly don't want to do that stuff. The only way I could see him being a head coach is if he goes somewhere smaller and he gets like he gets to do the Deion Sanders thing where he doesn't make recruiting visits and stuff. Like, he's got to have some kind of special thing, an assistant, but that's not going to be at Ohio State.
Who would take Ryan Day's place in your opinion then?
I don't know. People keep messaging me like, because I was a big Kirk Cignetti guy. When we did our Big Ten coaching rankings at the beginning of the preseason, I said Kirk Cignetti is the best coach in the Big Ten. Never in my wildest dreams would I think that he would have turned Indiana around this fast. Ask my wallet, because I keep betting against him, and I will again this year. Why do you keep betting Indiana? Because it's Indiana. Eventually, the 10 transfers that he brings in aren't going to, like, the depth is just still atrocious in Indiana. And you would think eventually that's going to show its ass, but it hasn't yet. But
Well, his 13 recruits that he brought with him from James Madison, none of those guys are lacking any talent, my friend. They are playing damn good football.
Well, and Curtis Rourke, it's funny. I even put in one of I talked about it before. Ohio State got Will Howard. I said Curtis Rourke was higher on my list than Will Howard because he's just so. He's just a supreme athlete. He's just such an underrated athlete, and that's really showing. That's showing right now. But I don't know. I don't think Kirk Cignetti's the type of dude to leave after 1 year.
No.
I mean, if it were me, I don't know. I mean, I watched Liberty last night, and Jamie Chadwell's got the teeth knocked in the last 2 weeks, so that's a bad example. But that would be someone that I would go look at, right? Hey, who's someone who Indiana did it the right way? Indiana went out and they found a guy who built a program, right? Brock and I had this discussion in the offseason, and I said my number one choice to replace Ryan Day was Kalen DeBoer. And a lot of people are making fun of me. They're like, well, Kalen DeBoer, they couldn't beat Vanderbilt at Alabama. Okay, well, he's still – let's not be insane here, right? These are clearly not it's Alabama. They're great players, but they're not the players that he wants, right? Jalen Milroe is not a Kalen DeBoer quarterback. He's not, right? And they're still doing really well. They beat Georgia. So I don't, people that are doing victory laps on that, I think that they're wrong. But a guy like that who has history of building a program, they're not going to go for the small school routes. Like Jamie Chadwell's a bad idea. The guy at Louisiana Monroe, they won like 2 games last year, and now they've already got like 6 wins. Like, to me, that's really impressive, right? GJ Kinney would be that would be someone I would interview. He's young. He's got extensive NFL experience, which recruits love. And he's built 2 small programs that are very hard to build. Ohio State's, I don't think they're going to do that. The day and age of them hiring guys like Jim Tressel, taking those kind of chances, are dead. But I would want to go out and find a program builder. I memean, honestly, I'm not even lying. I think that Ed Orgeron would do more at Ohio State than Ryan Day, because Ed Orgeron, I don't know. It feels like that guy he didn't want, if he wasn't good at something, he would just give it to someone else. Ryan Day has a really hard time doing that. If it wasn't for Chip Kelly being like basically his uncle, I still think he'd be calling plays today. And he's the one that always talks about that being the issue every offseason. But I mean,
so you don't want the former Buckeye linebacker from 2004, 2008, Marcus Freeman. I'm shocked. I'm shocked. Come on now. You need to get Marcus out of South Bend, Indiana for me. That's what you need to do.
Right. I honestly, I don't know if I would even, if they hired Marcus Freeman, I think that would still be an upgrade from Ryan Day, because Marcus Freeman has coaching at Notre Dame has its different set of issues than coaching at Ohio State when you're from Ohio State, right?
Exactly.
Theoretically, it would be much easier for him to keep guys like Brian Hartline, James Laurinaitis. Of course, we don't know if James Laurinaitis is a good coach, and we don't know if Brian Hartline's a good coach either, to be honest with you. We know he's a great recruiter. But I think that because that people reach out to me and they talk about Eddie George a lot, Eddie George being a potential candidate. I think that's an absolute train wreck of an idea. People are looking at Deion Sanders and they're thinking, we can do that. There's enough Ohio State people wanting to coach. And that's not a good, safe plan. No. I like Deion. I think Deion is doing, given the circumstance, I want to be when you're coaching college football, it's not just about the X's and O's, right? It's about recruiting. It's about being the face of something. It's about collecting NIL. It's about putting guys in the right spot. It's about allocating tasks. So as far as X's and O's goes, I know Ryan Day is a more intelligent individual than Deion Sanders, but Deion Sanders is a better college football coach because he's got all that shit in line, right? He's like, I know I can use my face when I need to get what we need, right? And then when it comes to the actual X's and O's, hire people that are intelligent enough to do it. And, the only blunder that Deion Sanders has made really is that he doesn't recruit. He doesn't go to recruits' homes, which is so stupid. It's so dumb for someone of his status. And he hired Warren Sapp. But recruits might like that. So I wouldn't have hired that.
Which I completely agree with. The hiring Warren Sapp is just a ridiculous notion. This guy was not that great of a player. He was a big.
Whoa!
Warren Sapp was not that great. He was not that great of a guy.
Did you just say Warren Sapp?
Warren Sapp was not that great
of a player.
I'm not gonna lie. I have a Warren Sapp signed Buccaneers jersey, a Warren Sapp signed Raiders jersey, and Miami jersey. I love Warren Sapp as a football player. As a human being, though, I don't know how you can talk to a recruit's parents and be like, "Hey, check it out. You can be coached by Warren Sapp." You know what I mean?
Exactly my point on Warren Sapp.
You just said he was a bad football player. In what world does Warren Sapp, one of the greatest defensive tackles in NFL history, one of the anchors of the Tampa 2 defense, one of the biggest regrets by the New York Jets, in what realm could you possibly say he was anything
because he's
spectacular on the football field?
He's not a good human being.
Nobody's a good human being in football. That's the whole point.
I'm trying to
You're a
think
bad
of
person.
No.
Okay, hold on. Wait, slow down, Brock.
It's violence. It's violence. And sometimes when football players are football players, they act like football players in non-football situations. All right, and that's the problem. However, he is a phenomenal football player. I cannot believe you just said Warren Sapp was not a good football player.
I'll take Vita Vea over Warren Sapp for the Tampa Bay defensive tackle any day of the week. Any day of the week.
You have lost your mind, my friend.
No, I haven't.
Yes, you have.
No, I haven't.
Vita Vea is a phenomenal player who deserves his accolades, no doubt about it.
I will take it over Warren Sapp any day of the week.
Oh boy.
Any day of the week.
So I didn't think the thing that derailed the show would be whether or not Warren Sapp was a good football player. So I didn't have that.
That's an outrageous statement. I'm sorry, that's an outrageous statement to say.
So
there's very few guys you can put over Warren Sapp, and all those guys in the Hall of Fame. Alan Page.
I guess my point is that I think that Deion Sanders has created a culture where fan bases, especially Ohio State, they're pointing at guys, former Ohio State players that are coaching somewhere, not even doing a great job. Like Eddie George. Eddie George might be a great coach someday. I don't know, but he's coaching at like Tennessee Martin or whatever.
Tennessee State.
Yeah, Tennessee State. That's unrealistic to expect that. First of all, Eddie George doesn't carry the same cachet as Deion Sanders. Even as an Ohio, I don't know why Ohio State fans think that. I mean, maybe he does. I don't think he does. Very few people do.
Except for the Ohio area, and I guess Ohio State fans, and certain parts of Tennessee.
I know he was on Survivor and he was in Broadway and stuff, but I don't think. But Prime is Prime. That's not
what players are watching.
That's just not. That's just not the solution. Is I guess my point for Ohio State fans, right? A lot of people point at Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel doesn't want to do the recruiting thing too either, man. Mike Vrabel's done with that. Mike Vrabel didn't like coaching with Urban Meyer. Mike Vrabel's he's not a college coach. You don't want to do it.
No.
I am surprised at all the names you mentioned, some good, some bad. John Summerall hasn't been mentioned at all. I think he's the perfect fit for Ohio State. I think what he's done at Troy for the past 2 years that he was there, and then you saw what he's doing this year at Tulane. I don't understand why people aren't jumping off the wall to go and get him. I think that he puts Ohio State in the national championship picture immediately, yet no one has mentioned his name. Can you speak on that, Josh?
No, I completely agree with you, dude. That's a great example of a coach there's physical evidence of him transforming a situation, right? That's what my goal would be if I was hiring a coach, right? There's no argument there. Ryan Day doesn't have that. There's no evidence that he can do that. Everything we're staring at, the thing I keep going back to, Ryan Day's a really good person. I want to be very clear. He's a very pleasant individual. I enjoy seeing him. I enjoy talking to him. He's very nice. Maybe the nice next to John Cooper, the nicest Ohio State head coach I've ever met. And John Cooper's probably only nice to me because I'm a sucker. And I go, tell me more about coaching at Tulsa. You know what I mean? Like I'm kind of a sucker for Cooper. That was the coach I grew up with, right? You know what I mean? So Ryan Day is just a super nice guy. But he took a program and he's made it worse. Urban Meyer had, and a common thing Ohio State fans point to is like, well, this is the best Michigan's ever been. He let them be that good. And I 100% believe that this whole Connor Stallion Spygate thing, that had an impact, but it didn't have an impact to where they should get the shit kicked out of them. Because you know what Urban Meyer would have done? Cheated back. You know what I mean? Like, let's be honest, right?
Yes, it's true.
You
Like,
can't
you-
tell
you-
me
you
that
wanna-
the man
you
didn't
wanna-
cheat himself. You can't tell me that Urban Meyer wasn't cheating. Come on now.
So some of the worst stuff that I've heard about Urban Meyer. First of all, when he got to Ohio State, the recruiting stuff, there were some rumors about how things are handled Florida recruiting wise. That stuff didn't happen at Ohio State. I know that for a fact because when he got there, the NCAA was still watching everything. I was worked in their compliance office during that period. Now, the sketchy things that he would do is that you would like if he had like you're only allowed to have so many coaches at practices or whatever. So he would like give his GAs helmets.
Yep.
Like so that if the NCAA was filming the practice, it would look like there was just, those guys were just players, but they weren't, they were coaches. There was
That's
guys that had
genius.
he would I remember there was a point too. Well, I think it was they would well, I probably shouldn't talk about it on the podcast. The players would do things that would probably be against the rules, but he would quickly nip it in the ass. You know what I mean? But I think that the old Florida
Make things go away.
Renegade Urban was not as abundant at Ohio State. There was a lot of checks. He was very mean. He was very like that was probably the worst thing he did, in my opinion. Was like, I mean, the way he would recruit too. He would go up to guys and like, hey man, like I'm trying not to give too much, but then like you would commit, put your pen to paper, and then he would act like he didn't even know you. It was like, you're mine now. You know what I mean? And that to me is kind of Ryan Day doesn't do that. I think Ryan Day is a very honest individual. A lot of people bitch about the Ohio recruiting, and what Urban Meyer would do a lot is that he would offer a lot of scholarships, conditional scholarships, basically to everybody in Ohio. Basically, so these high school kids would have to struggle to think about where they're going to, just to delay it for teams like LSU or someone who else might be interested. Ryan Day doesn't really do that. That's a lot of high school coaches don't really know what's going on either. They're like, why are you offering this kid? Why are you not offering these guys? Urban would have done that. And he's like, I don't want him. Urban didn't want him either. Like he just offered him. You know what I mean? Like, but you kind of have to do that. You know what I mean? There's just a lot of stuff that Ryan doesn't do because I think he's a really good person. I think it's holding him back. There's some other examples, but I'm sure you guys can figure it out, right?
So it's just a funny statement. Ryan Day doesn't do certain things to win because he's a good person. I think just kind of shows the issues with college football in general. I guess my next question for you is
the NILs, and I want to add to that too because people think that these college coaches are evil and there's always been this innate evilness and yada yada yada. NIL has made this a little worse because now it's giving these coaches credence to be like, bro, you're getting paid now, bitch. You know what I mean? So I want to be that. I don't think that the NIL was the bastion of freedom that we thought it was going to be.
You are definitely right about that. And, I cover UNLV, so I've been kind of in the middle of this whole NIL kind of thing. So, you preach to the choir, bro. But I guess my next question for you
that was one of the things that Ryan Day was struggling with, too, by the way. If you look at guys like, I'm such an idiot. Miami, if you look at Miami's recruiting classes the last couple of years, what's the name of the running back? The running back was committed to Ohio State for like, I don't know, man, ever since he was like a sophomore. And then all of a sudden on signing day, he goes down to Miami. Well, they're bringing in these boats of cash, and then they're coming back to Ryan Day and Ohio State, and he's like, I'm not doing that. This is how they would handle the NIL situation back in the day when it first started. Ryan Day would bring you in a room, and if your first thing as a recruit was, hey, how much cash can I get, i.e. Dylan Royola, he would say, that's the door. And I know that for a fact. The second thing is he would say, listen, I'm not going to – they would obviously get to the money part. You have to. And he would say, well, we don't – you're not going to get a huge bag as a true freshman. You're not going to make more than everybody else here. Right. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you out to the parking lot. And you can see CJ Stroud's Rolls Royce. You can see Marvin Harrison's Bentley. That's what you're capable of. And these kids a lot of these kids did not like that. They did not like that. Now he's changed that. Some of these freshmen are getting bags and you guys know that. But it's still not like, it's not, that's another thing that I do think that I got to give Ryan Day credit. He handles that very well. Just like the transfer portal too. Like a lot of people were like messing like, oh, he brought in Quinshawn Judkins. How does Travion Henderson feel? Nah, man, he talks to those guys. Whether he tells them or he talks to them, those guys know. Just like when Julian Sand came in. Aaron Nolan knew. Aaron Nolan knew, right? Whether he liked it or not, I don't know. But Ryan Day's I got to give him credit. He's a very upstanding individual. I think
he didn't put up with all this nonsense surrounding Quinn Ewers either. He did not put up with all that BS that was going on with Quinn Ewers and his $1 million NIL deal. He just
but some of that and that but the coaching part of the Quinn Ewers saga he handled poorly. So when Quinn Ewers the whole Quinn Ewers wanted to make cash as quickly as possible. I'm not in Ryan Day's head. Maybe Ryan Day knew what he was doing the whole time, but in hindsight, it does not appear so. So when Quinn Ewers got to campus, Quinn Ewers didn't travel. They didn't dress Quinn Ewers at some of the games. Quinn Ewers was basically a glorified water boy, man. Like it was. They would do. Quinn Ewers had a rough time at Ohio State. It was very clear that Ryan Day had no interest in playing that young man. So to a lot of people, it appeared that Ryan Day was like, this guy's going to be gone. I'm not going to even waste my time. And that might be true. Maybe that was the right way to play it. But also he's done that to other freshmen that end up staying. That appears to me to be more of a Ryan Day thing. We saw Nick Saban and Nick Saban's gone now, but we saw Nick Saban when the NIL stuff happened, the transfer portal happened. Those freshmen were going in earlier. Those freshmen were being filtered in earlier to kind of keep them, appease them. And Quinn Ewers was wanting that, and he had no interest in doing that. And he did that a lot. And I want to say that was all part of Ryan Day's grandmaster plan. Like, this kid was not going to be here for very long. And Quinn Ewers had a hard time. Donovan knows more than I about the Quinn Ewers saga. I can tell you that as soon as that dude stepped on Ohio State's campus, he was signing autographs at the mall. On bye weeks, he was going out to the mall. I know that there were a couple occasions where the coaches were like, hey, why don't you throw some extra passes or, stay for film. And he'd be like, no, I got to go to the mall and sign autographs for $200 a pop. You know what I mean? I know that happened. So again, maybe that was all part of Ryan Day's design, but he did that. He didn't travel and he didn't dress a lot of guys. CJ Stroud barely saw the field before his first year starting. Kyle McCord started one game because CJ Stroud was hurt. But, Jack Miller was a former 5-star guy who's retired now. I know that he's not very good, but didn't see any time. Harry Miller, who's the center that dealt with a lot of mental issues and ended up medically retiring. He didn't travel when he was a freshman. He was a 5-star. There's a lot of highly recruited guys that didn't see any time, and you got to wonder if that's just might be a Ryan Day thing. Like, would have last year have happened if he would have had Quinn Ewers? Like, is that his fault? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Ryan Day. And in hindsight, does not appear that he handled the Quinn Ewers situation as best that he could. But I also don't blame him 100% for the fallout of that.
No, exactly. And that's what I'm saying. He handled that whole situation as best as he could. And if he doesn't want to start you as a freshman, I don't care if you're a freshman. You learn. Right. Just like the NFL quarterbacks need to be set down for a year at least to learn how to play in the NFL, because you see every year all these kids coming in, they get killed. The Bryce Youngs and all this other jazz, they get killed and they don't pan out because nobody has enough patience to sit down with these kids and their agents and say, you're sitting down for 1 year. We're not going to start you. That's it. Nobody has any patience anymore.
And I think that I agree with you 100%. The problem is at a place like Ohio State, if you sit the bench and you are a stud like Quinn Ewers, and there's a lot of them that they're not Quinn Ewers, but they're on that same level that have that same kind of humorous, right? Like Zach Evans at Ole Miss was the same way, right? If you're not filtering those guys or showing an effort of, hey, you're gonna be the dude, you want to throw a couple passes. I'm not just going to throw you. He was doing this thing too where they would be up by 50 points and he would let the backup quarterback go in for the last 2 drives and they would just hand off. And it's like, that's not super sexy for a guy that wants to get paid and play now. I understand what you're saying. You're saying is better for the game of football, but in the grand scheme of, but these kids don't give a shit. They want to get paid. They want to play. And Ryan Day does need to make a better effort of filtering those guys. And he has this year. And I think that he's learning on the transfer portal. I think that Chip Kelly's gotten in his ear too, because Julian Sand has played, 4 games this year. I don't think in the Ryan Day era we've ever seen more than 2 quarterbacks play. It's always been the starter and the backup, and now Julian Sands getting time. That's interesting. It's because he wants that dude to stay, right? And you're starting to see that with a lot of
he's not just handing the football off either. That's the other
thing. He's continuing on the offense. Edric Houston, the 5-star defensive end, that dude's playing. That dude's getting snaps, right? Like I think he's starting to see the writing on the wall. Unfortunately, that's where we're at. The day where the guy sits the bench for 3 years, like Will Allen, who waited 3 years behind Mike Doss before he became an All-American his very last year on campus. Those days are done.
Yeah.
So you mentioned your great. I'll go back to my first question. Your greatest point of concern preseason was the linebacking core. It sounds like that hasn't changed. What, other than just firing coaches, what else do you think might help the linebacking group at Ohio State to go from being a weakness to a strength?
The linebacking group is never going to be a strength, and I've accepted that. But the linebacking group is not a liability because you have enough talent around them to not. They're only a liability in certain games because they're not letting the defensive line pin their ear back, right? So you're forcing these guys to be in coverage longer than they have to be. I think that's the biggest issue. You would think by now they would know how to fill a gap, right? And most of them don't. Gabe Powers, when he goes out there, he looks really good, but they have no interest in playing him. Why? I don't know. He's got like the highest PFF grade. I mean, if you go watch his film, he's very active. He moves towards the ball. Even when he's wrong, he's going somewhere. You guys have all been around the game long enough to where if you don't know where you're going, at least go. Right. Sonny Styles, there's a lot of plays where he's just not going. He's just staying. Right. But they're not a liability anymore. I think that they've gotten past some of that. Like I said, if you watch this last game, they weren't a liability at all. They were far better than the defensive backs, in my opinion, the last 2 games. We saw against Marshall. I think that was the one group where playing smaller schools and crappy opponents really helped them. You would see a couple games where, like, Marshall was really telling. There was a goal line play where Marshall handed it off and he dove over the line, and Cody Simon was just kind of standing there waiting to hug him. Well, the next week, whoever they played ran the same play, and he was like, "Nah, dude, I'm meeting you." Right, and you can kind of see that, right? With the tight end play against Iowa, Sonny Styles was getting beat, and I feel like he got beat against Oregon too, but he was at least chasing. Like, it wasn't like he was nowhere around. So I think that they have improved where they're at. They're always going to be a liability, but I don't. You have to change it by strengthening everybody else around them. And I also think you should rotate more. CJ Hicks is a really good blitzer. CJ Hicks is not great in coverage. CJ Hicks is a liability in coverage. Okay, we'll rotate him where he's blitzing. You can do that when you're Ohio State. You obviously can't do it every time, but you can rotate that guy. You can rotate Gabe Powers. Maybe that's the issue. Maybe they're not fresh. Maybe they need to see something else. I don't know. I think that you have enough talent on the defensive line, though, to where you should be smushing mostly everybody, getting a good pass rush. And you have enough talent in the defensive backfield to where if you give those guys safety help, no one's going deep on you, and that makes your linebacker's job a lot easier. But with the defensive line, again, take out last week, Dylan Gabriel had all day, and those linebackers had to stay in coverage, and they weren't blitzing. He only blitzed. That's one of the reasons why he blitzed, where he benched CJ Hicks too, because he blitzes the linebackers like once a game. So we'll see what he does against Penn State, because I think that he's wanting to bring some more heat. But I don't know if there's that. I think that strengthening and scheming those other areas would help the linebackers, but they're just the weakness. That's just how it's going to be.
Why doesn't Reese see more time as well?
Well, Reese starts. Arvo Reese plays a shit ton. He remember last week he got kicked out of the game because the phantom head-to-head call, which they took away. So he'll be back for Penn State. But he didn't start. I don't know why he didn't see action at the beginning. At the beginning of the year, it was Cody Simon, CJ Hicks, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
Cody Simon's been there for 4 years, former 5-star recruit, dealt with a lot of injuries, very intelligent player. That's not his issue at all. Just maybe just lacks this. He ain't Ryan Shazier athletically. And then CJ Hicks was a former 5-star guy who rumors indicate was like, I'm gonna leave, dude. I need to play. And they were like, all right, you're big, fast, athletic. Let's rock and roll. Let's see what you can do. And he just kind of pooped down his leg. And Sonny Styles needs to be on the field. He is an athletic freak. He's an athletic freak. But he shouldn't be a line. They want to put Sonny Styles on the field, and unfortunately they can't put him at safety because Caleb Downs and Latham Ranson are back there. I would rotate him back there. I don't think he's a linebacker. But that's why so you got those three guys that definitely take precedence. But Arvell Reese has played well enough to where he's starting now. So you're definitely going to see more of Arvell Reese as the season goes on because he is definitely starting.
I don't have Styles listed as a linebacker at all either. I really don't.
Yeah,
he's a safety at the NFL level.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so Brock, what other questions do you have for our?
Yep. I just have just going back. What has been the hesitancy by the ADs and the administration to make a move regarding Ryan Day? I mean, I'm sure they hear it every single year. Obviously, I think we're kind of in agreement, regardless of what happens this season, unless it's a total collapse. Ryan Day is back in 2025. Whether that's justified or not is to be debatable. But do you believe that there's a lack of courage in the AD's office to make a move, if possible, if they wanted to?
Yeah, dude. 100%. I think that fear motivates them to keep him. First of all, you and I are in the minority. Most people view Ryan Day as a top 5 great coach, right? They see his record. They, oh my God, he's only lost 7 games and he's won $7 million. Oh my God. Well, $6 million were against Akron. That's the problem that I had. That's the problem that you have. You know me, and we're all aware of expectations. We're all aware, and I tell you what else makes you aware when you're gambling, right? Because when you see that the average spread against MAC opponents is 45 points, and he's, you know what I mean? Like they play 3 games a year. Let's really break it. Ohio State plays 3. That's the part that I think makes the athletic department scared. Is they don't view the season like you and I, right? I view the season as 3 games a year because I could coach them. I could coach them to be Akron. I don't think I'm exaggerating. I think all of us could coach them to be Akron, right? You have to really screw that up. I mean, Ohio State's been around, since 1890? And Luke Fickell's the only dude. No, Luke Fickell had a winning record. I think Luke Fickell, maybe he was like 66. Dude, Earl Bruce got fired. He was winning 10 games a year. John Cooper didn't have a losing record. He just couldn't beat Michigan, which is the same problem Ryan Day's having, right? But it's so weird. You can't lose. You can lose at Ohio State. I want to be very clear about that. I understand that, right? Because Michigan fans probably said that 30 years ago, and then Rich Rod and Brady Hoke came in. But Rich Rod was also kind of sabotaged. Like, you know what I mean? Like, Michigan also didn't help themselves, right? We all kind of know that story a little bit in Rich Rod's defense. It's really hard to lose at Ohio State, man. Most teams, but hire Bronco Mendenhall. Bronco Mendenhall is going to win every game Ryan Day won. That's, you know what I mean? Like, it's not hard, but that's the hesitancy. They see that his winning record, and they don't want to lose that. Their theory is the grass isn't always greener, and my theory is, well, let's at least look. You know what I mean? Because those are the games where he actually has to coach. He's losing. The only games that he wins where he's actually got the other teams got the same amount of talent is Penn State and Clemson in 2020. That's it, man. Yeah. And then Notre Dame, I know I gave Notre Dame a hard time at the beginning of the show because they lost 4 games later on that year. That Notre Dame team was better than I think that, but Notre Dame was better than I originally gave them credit for, but they're also not as good as the top 5 rating. Who's the quarterback? Tyler Beckner, who he was the starting quarterback, transferred down to Alabama, couldn't sniff the field. Now he's playing lacrosse at Notre Dame and now he's a walk-on receiver. Like, dude, come on, man. Like, we're going to look back at that game and be like, why is that a thing? Why are we looking back? Why is that? That's one of his top 5 wins. If you rank Ryan Day wins, that's one of his top 5 wins. And that's not good. But the athletic department doesn't view it that way. They don't want to. They just don't want to become. I really think that when Michigan fell down the mountain with Rich Rod, Brady Hoke, I think it really sent a ripple effect throughout the rest of the Big Ten. And they're like, well, we'd rather win 10 games than 8, or 7 or whatever the issue is. But sometimes you got to roll the dice, man. You commit. Yeah, Nebraska took a long time to get to Matt Rule. I think that Matt Rule's the guy. I think that Matt Rule is the dude. He's going to turn Nebraska around. Should they have fired Bo Pelini? I don't know.
But they hired back Bo Pelini?
What'd you say?
Hire him back or what? What are you talking
No,
about?
I mean, should they have fired? That's a similar example to firing Ryan Day. Is like when Nebraska fired Bo Pelini. But an argument could be made that like they've reached the finish line. They have their guy now, right? They were never going to win a national championship with Bo Pelini. You're at Nebraska, right? I don't think that I really, Ohio State has more talent. They have enough talent to win a championship in spite of Ryan Day. And I don't think they're going to do that, dude. I just don't think he's got the cojones, man. And that's their hesitation is that he's beat every single goddamn MAC team. And another thing that people don't understand too, because Ohio State fans message me all the time about Urban Meyer. Well, Urban Meyer lost to Purdue. Urban Meyer lost to Iowa. You can do that in today and age is college football. You can't because you're not competing. You're not competing with the playoff spot against goddamn Purdue. You're competing with Oregon. So you can't lose to Oregon. You can't lose to Penn State. You can't lose to Michigan because when the TV stations look at it, they're picking between those teams, right? When recruits are choosing a school, you can convince anybody, TV networks or whoever, that that loss was a fluke. You can do that when you lose to someone shitty. We saw it all the time. That's what they did with Urban Meyer. Oh, they lost to Purdue. Well, that Rondale Moore is really good. Ohio State came out sleepy, and then we moved on. You don't do that when you lose to Penn State, Oregon, and Michigan. You go, oh, that team's better, right? So it sounds bad justifying a loss, but there's a difference. I would rather lose those one shit game every 2 years than lose the big ones. Urban Meyer lost to Virginia Tech and then rocked and rolled the rest of the way, all the way to a national championship. Ryan Day doesn't do that. Ryan Day smashes everybody and then loses in the Big Ten championship or loses against Michigan. He doesn't. To me, it's very clear which one you'd rather have, but it's hard for people to admit or see.
Yeah.
I just want to join in on the Ryan Day shitfest for a second because I gotta get some things on my chest. Bo Pelini and Ryan Day are in their situations are apples and oranges. Nebraska, basically, he did exactly what Frank Solt did when he was there, outside of making the national championship game. And quite frankly, the national championship game Frank Solt made, Nebraska shouldn't have been at. But that's neither here nor there. But what I am saying is that Nebraska thought that they were bigger than themselves, and that's why they are where they are. At least that's why they've been where they've been for the past 10 years. Ryan Day at Ohio State is the complete opposite, in my opinion. They don't think they're that big, in my opinion, where they have the lack of confidence to say, hey, Ryan Day's not our guy. We are a premier program in college football. Let's go get our dude. Ryan Day's entire career, outside of the Sugar Bowl where they beat Clemson, has been a massive failure. There's no other way to put it. Yes,
which by the way, that win was a COVID win too, which I know it shouldn't. It's still a win, but that's a little bit of an asterisk. That's a little bit of an asterisk.
It's a little bit of an asterisk. I mean, and also coincided with Clemson becoming dog shit. Lack for a better, I don't have a better term for the next couple of years after that. In terms of the national championship standards that they used to have. With that being said, outside of the first Clemson-Ohio State matchup, I cannot confidently say Ryan Day has impressed me as a coach at all. And that was with Urban's roster. In the last time he won a Big Ten championship game, he needed Trey Sermon to run his tail off against Northwestern or they were going to lose. The only top 5 victory I can remember is that game against Notre Dame to open up the season, and preseason rankings don't really count. Ryan Day was very poor in South Bend last year. Ryan Day has lost to Michigan 3 straight years. Ryan Day has failed to make the national championship game since the COVID year. All of these things add up to saying, what can we do to change these results? Well, you tried everything. You brought in new coordinators on both the offensive and the defensive side of the ball. You allowed him to recruit his guys. You allowed him to institute his culture, and it's clearly not working. Why? And if you're Ohio State, if you're the Buckeyes, I think this is a prevalent problem that's existed since Woody Hayes left, or more importantly, got fired. Ohio State doesn't have the balls or the courage to say, we are the goddamn Buckeyes. Come hell or high water, we will win time in and time out. I know that we've talked many times, Josh, and your expectations for Ohio State is win Big Ten championships, maybe a national championship here and there, But in my opinion, the standard every single year should be as high as Alabama. And that goes back to our killing the board discussion that we had off camera several months ago. Killing the board went into a worse situation at Alabama than he would have at Ohio State. Alabama plays a harder schedule with a worse roster, and they're losing a bigger coach that he has to be compared against. And as we all know, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yep.
Ryan Day has had a better roster, an easier schedule, and a clear path to a national championship for the past, 5 years, and has failed to get it done time and time again. He failed in that final drive against Georgia. He's failed against Michigan. He's failed in the playoffs. He's failed to even reach the playoffs. And outside of an absolute heroic effort by Jackson Smith and Jigba in the Rose Bowl, he would have lost that game to Utah as well. I don't understand how you can have at least 10 examples over 5 years of big time primetime games, and he's 1-9 in them.
Well, let me
I don't
say
get it.
this.
I just don't get it, bro. I just don't get it. That's
let
not
me-
a point. I'm just on a rant. But I don't get it.
No. Let me say this because first of all, I want to apologize because you were 100%. Comparing Bo Pelini to to Ryan Day was a complete insult to Bo Pelini, and I do apologize. And you were 100% right. The more apt comparison, I don't know why I got off it, was Larry Coker. But even that isn't really a fair
Beautiful comparison. That's
but even that's not really a super fair comparison because Larry Coker actually got the national championship before everything fell apart, right? And then even some of those things that you're giving him credit for, they kind of deserve an asterisk. The only reason they got into the playoffs that year when they almost beat Georgia, dude, they didn't even go to the Big Ten championship game. If that's any other school, they're not even getting invited to the playoffs. But because they're Ohio State, they got that opportunity, and then they lost, right? So that also deserves an asterisk. The Utah game that you so graciously gave him credit for winning, dude, that's one of his best victories. And as a reminder, Ohio State players sat out. Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson sat out that game.
Game, exactly.
If you sit out a game, if you have players sitting out that game, should we count that as a big victory? They voluntarily sat out. I don't.
Can we
the game means nothing.
Well, that to Utah didn't mean nothing. It meant a lot of things to Utah. I want to add 2 counterpoints there. One, I want to remind everyone the last time he made the college football playoffs, he needed both USC to lose in the Pac-12 championship game, and he needed Alabama to have 2 losses, which they picked up that year by a grand total differential margin of losses of 4 points. That was a loss to Tennessee at Tennessee, and the loss at LSU. So Ryan Day's inclusion in that playoffs was by damn near sheer luck. Secondly, and we're going back to that Rose Bowl game, we knew what the starting rosters were entering that game, and Ohio State was clearly the better team. And the fact that they let Utah basically run over them for a vast majority of the game. Again, Jackson Smith and Jigba having to pull out the game of his life to be victorious. I think it's more of a credit to the fact that Jackson Smith and Jigba is an absolute stud and a lack of preparation for Ryan Day, which is a continued trend in college football. Now, I don't want to say this as a shit on Ryan Day train because I do believe that he is a very good head coach. I think that if he does go even another place in the Power 5, outside the Big Ten or outside the SEC as well, they go to the Big 12, I think that that's going to be a team that's going to be constantly ranked in the top 8 year after year after year. The problem is Ohio State is a top 3 team and top 3 program in the country. And we could disagree on what Ryan Day is like outside
But who did
State.
Utah beat that year, Brock? Who did Utah beat that year to get to play to Ohio State?
Oregon.
Was
Oregon? And USC. And USC.
USC was good that year.
Doesn't matter. It's still USC. It's Oregon.
You can't say it's still USC. USC was 6-6.
They beat, but they still beat their programs that they had to beat to get there. That's my whole point. That is a damn good Utah football team that got to that game. That was a damn good Utah team.
Yeah, and a wrestling run program, but it's Ohio State. Let's not.
No. See, you're putting too much. You're putting too much name behind the Ohio State Buckeyes in that situation because, as Josh pointed out, Olave and the other receiver sitting out that game. You have to take that into account. You don't have to take that into account when you're starting 2 wide receivers like Jackson Smith and Jigba and Marvin Harrison. When you're starting quarterback is C.J. Stroud.
And what NFL players were on the Utes at that time? Clark Phillips, corner for sure. I think maybe a linebacker, and a bunch of young guys who eventually got better, but they were freshmen, sophomores when they played. Like, come on, let's not talk.
Well, I think
you're putting too much weight behind the Ohio State Buckeyes name there.
It's not about the Ohio State Buckeyes name. That's first round.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. It's just like when I said TCU was going to be in the playoff that year, and you guys all said no chance, no chance, no chance. No, TCU deserved to go to that playoff. Bottom line, the Ohio State Buckeyes, had they had Olave in that roster, would have destroyed the Utah Utes. They would have destroyed them because Clark Phillips.
I think that. But that's part of the problem with the Ryan Day argument, though, right? Is that people are counting that game towards his resume of like, oh, look how good he did. But if the game means so little that guys are sitting out, it's an exhibition. It shouldn't count. That's what you're right. Ohio State, the talent that they had that year, had they had Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, would have demolished Utah. But they also didn't win enough of the games in the regular season for it to matter, right? Because they were playing an exhibition where guys sat out. I don't even think that those are the only two guys that sat out that year or that game.
You had a couple of defensive players out of that roster as well. There was a couple of guys.
I can't remember who else.
So I just want to add to this point before we move on for the side. I know we've been on there for a while. Yes, they did beat Oregon. Utah did beat Oregon twice that year. One time Oregon was ranked as number 3 team in the nation, and the last time was in the Pac-12 championship game when they were ranked number 10. Utah also lost 3 other games that year. One to unranked BYU, one to unranked San Diego State, and one to unranked Oregon State. USC was 4-8 that year, and that was the year they fired Helton 2 weeks into the season. Arizona State was their only other ranked win on the record. And then if you look up and down their wins, they beat a 1-win Arizona team, a 3-win Stanford team, and a 4-8 Colorado team. So I don't want to necessarily say they were world beaters.
I'm not saying they were world beaters, but they were prepared to play the Ohio State Buckeyes as best they could against what the Buckeyes actually were, which was a much further reduced team. That's all I'm saying. And when people say it was the Ohio State Buckeyes that got beat, Josh was right. This is an exhibition game for the Ohio State Buckeyes.
But what I'm saying is that Ohio State came into the game with a lot better players, but Utah was the much better coached team, which is a testament to the fact that Ryan Day even is not a winning coach. Even in this exhibition, they're still playing in the Rose Bowl. It's not, it's the Rose Bowl.
I want to be very clear because I tend to go on these rants about Ryan Day and people think that I hate him. He is a good coach. I think that X's and O's, few are better. I think that, and you talked about him going to the Big 12. I think the best spot for him would be the NFL because because I think that the thing that he lacks is the emotion. I mean, when Will Howard went out there the last drive against Oregon, Urban Meyer would have grabbed him by the face mask and said, don't fuck this up. Urban Meyer was always in the kicker's ear. Urban Meyer was in everybody's face all the time, right? Ryan Day never does that, man. Ryan Day just kind of, he doesn't do that. And that's fine. He has a very professional way of doing things. It doesn't make him a bad coach. It makes him a bad college coach. It doesn't make because these kids need you. They're stupid. You're like they're pissing down their leg. They're freaking out. They're college kids, man. Get in his face. Tell him what's going on. You better be. This isn't college. This isn't college football 25 on your Xbox, brother. Like when you go down on a knee and you call a time, you press the start button. A timeout ain't happening. Like someone's got to explain.
I would take Ryan Day down for the Dallas Cowboys. I really would. I think the Dallas Cowboys, he would be a fine coach for the Cowboys. He really would. And I think
that he would thrive in that environment because that was the big issue about Nick Saban, why he couldn't make in the NFL, right? What's the whole story where he got up at Jason Taylor's face to tell him to do something, and Jason Taylor said, "No, dude, I make way too much money for your little ass be talking shit to me." And that's Jason Taylor, who's like a very chill individual, said that shit to him. Like, that, you know what I mean? Like these college coaches, these successful college coaches, they bring that extra fire. And I don't think that Ryan Day has that. I think Pete Carroll's the only guy that was able to really kind of, cross that bridge in my lifetime, at least, because his passion.
Jimmy Johnson.
That's before my time. But I mean, I got to see Pete Carroll at USC, and like he had that. He was more relaxed when he was giving those little pep talks and shit, and that's why it transitioned to him being a good NFL coach. But Ryan Day doesn't even do that. Ryan Day doesn't really do the. I mean, you've seen the little highlights, the little pump up videos that they do. Ryan Day just doesn't really inspire you, and that's fine. It doesn't mean he's a bad coach. He's just in college, that's what you need. Shit, dude. On the pregame warmups, they still play Urban Meyer speeches, man. Like that's not a good sign. You've been there for 6 years. You ain't got no speech that they can put up on the billboard or the scoreboard. You got to use Urban's. What's going on, man? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I want to add to your point. Like Pete Carroll was a lot different than Saban because Saban is aggressive in a negative way. Pete Carroll was aggressive in a very positive way. He's very uplifting. And that's the big difference.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
But even so, even if you get the rah-rah from Ryan Day, in the modern landscape of football in general, especially college football, you can't be negative at all anymore. And that's just the way it is. And whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is to be determined. Because obviously you want to talk about kids are soft and stuff. Let's not act like coaches weren't legitimately abusing 19-year-olds when they were in positions of power either. So I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing of like this new culture shift. But it definitely needed to change, and Ryan Day is not with that time either, unfortunately.
Abuse is a strong word, and I know I keep using these negative points of view of Urban. Urban was a great coach. I'm just trying to explain the difference, the starking difference between them. Urban did a lot of good too, though. There's a lot of players that it's like the players almost. Someone described it. Like the players were better united and they were a better team because they knew it was always them versus the coaching staff when they weren't playing. You know what I mean? Like it was like it created a better. You know what I mean? But you talk to some of those guys still hate him, and then some of those guys are like, "That's the best. He's the best human being in the world," right? You know what I mean? Like it's a mixed bag. But I think most of your good coaches are a mixed bag. I mean, or Woody Hayes. There's the guy got fired for punching a player, and there's examples of him being an absolute wild man with some of these players. But that dude was also a good person, right? Right before he died. I mean, Rod Gerald was a former quarterback at Ohio State, moved to wide receiver, and he didn't get his degree, and he left to go to the NFL. Things didn't work out, and he had some addiction issues. And Woody Hayes there's stories where Woody Hayes would call him like every week, begging him to go to rehab, come back to school, paying for his school. And I think that Urban Meyer does stuff like that too. Like I'm not saying that these guys are evil. I'm just saying like when you're a coach, there has to be something there.
Guys who have edge.
But there's a clear line between edge and being an asshole, though.
I still see these stories how great Bo Schembechler was, but there's nothing great about Bo Schembechler, in my opinion. Bottom line, never has been, never will be. No, seriously, Bo Schembechler was a disgusting human being, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, okay.
He was a disgusting human being. He really was. And I've heard people in Michigan say the same thing about Schembechler, that he was a nasty, nasty human being. And that just really has always bothered me about Bo Schembechler, is the way that he treated players outside of his organization as well. That guy was just a nasty human being, and that is no longer needed in the world of football today. Thank goodness. Thank goodness.
Unfortunately, I have to agree with Greg. Schembechler's an asshole, and if there's a heaven and a hell, I don't think he made it all in the elevator all the way up. You know what I'm saying?
God damn, dude, Jesus!
Wow.
What? No. I want to talk about this. All right, no, because Joe Paterno one time said when asked why hasn't he retired, is because he couldn't leave the world of college football to the Barry Switzers and Jackie Sherrills of the world. Well, you know what Barry Switzer and Jackie Sherrill weren't doing? Allowing kids to get molested. All right, so we need to have a legitimate conversation. What you've done on the football field does not separate yourself. I'm about to make myself a hypocrite for the whole Warren Sapp thing. But I'm not saying Joe Paterno wasn't a good football coach. What I am saying is that Joe Paterno should not get the accolades that he has because he allowed this thing to happen under his watch. Same thing with Bo Schembechler. The fact that the University of Michigan has their football auditorium, the complex named after him, is absolute disgrace to not only the institution, but the victims that suffered under Schembechler's knowledge. And that needs to change immediately, just like Penn State needs to get rid of everything that has ever said paternal ever. Because the fact remains this: no matter how many football games you win, no matter how many football games you lose, society moves on. But the victims that he allowed to be victimized under his watch, they don't. And that needs to be addressed.
And that's where my despising of Bo Schembechler comes from.
Bo Schembechler went into the eternal elevator. That went down.
Yep.
Right down.
So the thoughts, views, actions, and outbursts that you may have heard from both the Master Gunnery Sergeant Greg Rector and the babyface assassin Brock Vieira reflect, of course, only their own thoughts, views, actions, and emotions, and do not reflect a company policy, both written, implied, or stated, of Team MBS Media. I just want to make sure that everybody's aware of that. Thank you so much. So we actually were going to talk at some point about a few other things sort of about football, like the X's and O's side of football, but I guess we may not get to that as much. We got a little off track. But the rest of the Ohio State season, Josh, give me your prediction for this upcoming game and then the rest of the season. How do you think this game and then the season itself play out going forward?
All right, I want to be completely transparent before I say this. Okay, I was so confident Ohio State beating Oregon. I took them not on a teaser, on a pleaser, my friend. They were giving not only did I bet on them to give the points, but I bet on them to give 13.5. Okay.
Oh,
that's how confident I was. So I want to be very transparent. I'm going back to the well, baby. Now I'm not going to do a pleaser. Okay. But I am going to drop what's the spread again? 3.5, I believe. No, 4. Ohio State's giving, no, it's dropped to 3.5. Ohio State is favored by 3.5 points. I'm still taking it. Drew Aller's bumped and bruised. Dennis Sutton has been bumped and bruised. They're kind of hitting him just at the right time. Ohio State's coming off a really rough-looking game against Nebraska, so hopefully that refocuses them. I really think Ohio State. Ryan Day owns James Franklin. He owns James. That's the only. James Franklin is single-handedly saving Ryan Day's job. So I think the Ohio State. Ryan Date's not an idiot. Ryan Day knows that. They're going to pour it on. I think Ohio State smashes them. Now, the rest of the season, Ohio State should roll on through. The only issue that I have is the Michigan game. Now, when I say that on my podcast, everybody goes, "Oh, Michigan blows, Josh. Michigan blows, Josh. Get the Harbaugh years out of your head." No, dude, it's still a rivalry game. There has to be some kind of mental block that's there now for Ryan Day when he sees Michigan. Like, it's just got to exist. Sharon Moore was on the staff, was actually the head coach when they lost the last year. And Michigan's not bad. I don't know what they're doing. If it was me, I would run with Orgy, run a variation of the option offense and just rock and roll. And if they do manage to make that change before Michigan, that's going to be really hard for Ohio State to defend. And Michigan's got a good defense. They always have a great defense. Will Johnson, I don't know what's going on with him this year. He's been bumped and bruised, and he hasn't looked great. But we know he's awesome. We know he's an All-American. The defensive line's great. So Michigan still scares me. They have enough talent to where they have enough talent, and the history is conflicting enough to where that's not just going to be a snooze fest like everybody assumes. But everything else, Ohio State, typical Ohio State Ryan Day schedule where they're just going to smash everybody. The talent gap between Ohio State and everybody else is so wide. And I tried to also emphasize that when I kept saying, listen, if you don't move on from Ryan Day, Harbaugh's gone. Ryan Day can be the best coach in the Big Ten. Ryan Day can rise to the top of the Big Ten. And Oregon comes right through the door, just like I said in the offseason. Dan Lanning and Oregon came right through the door because there's only like 3 teams in the Big Ten with the same amount of talent as Ohio State. And Penn State's kind of the last one on their schedule. So,
yeah. And I kind of want to go. So, first of all, I want to add my take to this game because despite everything I just said about Ryan Day, I also have Ohio State winning this one big because Penn State is Penn State. And despite the fact that they had a very comfortable win at the end, they looked absolutely awful in the first half against Wisconsin last week. And that was very, very concerning. You don't tell me they didn't look bad. They look pretty bad.
I think there's a difference between the way they look bad Like a lot of Ohio State fans are just going, "Oh, Ohio State looked sleepy against Nebraska." No,
Exactly.
They were coming off of a bye week, and like they looked awful. They never got better. Penn State, like they looked sleepy. Like they looked like they were coming out. They were looking ahead for Ohio State, and then at the end of the game, they were pretty much in control. I had money on Penn State that game, and at no point, and I was given 6 points, and at no point was I scared that I was going to lose my money. But if you had money on Ohio State, you were sweating bullets, and Ohio State was favored by like 30 points, by the way. You know what I mean? Like,
no, I know. I did have money on Ohio State. That's not the point. I also had money on Penn State. So shout out.
By the way, if Dylan Raiola wasn't so bad, and I like Dylan, I think you could see Dylan Raiola is going to be good. You can see it. Okay. I can see it. But he was awful. Like if they would have had Stone from Marshall, they would have won that game. There were receivers open. They would have won that game. Dylan, he's going to be good. He's going to be good.
That was a freshman. That was a freshman quarterback. I mean, it was a perfect example of why you don't want to have a freshman out there against Ohio State. It was just a
perfect example.
You know,
I also want to add. Oh, sorry, Greg. I apologize. Continue.
I hate to disagree with both of you here about your predictions for the Ohio State Buckeyes, but as you can see, I'm wearing my Penn State Nittany Lions hoodie tonight. And Brock, you know, just like last week when UNLV lost to the Boise State Broncos that I told you was going to happen, I blame Ohio State and Fox Network for this game being a daytime game. It should have been a whiteout game. But anyhow, I still have Penn State beating the Ohio State Buckeyes. It's going to be a close one. I've got it 31-28 Buckeyes. Buckeyes losing.
Well, I mean, Penn State could have made this game their whiteout game too, but James Franklin's afraid of losing his whiteout game, so that's why he doesn't schedule big time matchups for that event. I'd like to add real quick that James Franklin has the only reason that I had no words when I bet against Penn State with Penn State 6.5 last week isn't because of Penn State. It's because they're playing Wisconsin, who I've had my issues with in the past. They got a linebacker returning punts. Don't look at me like that, Josh. They got a linebacker returning punts.
Yep.
Yeah. Man, when I saw that, I almost lost my mind. What is this big white boy doing catching the ball? All right.
Yeah, that's Luke Fickell. That's Luke Fickell. We've discussed Mr. Fickell and his bad placement at Madison.
Yeah.
I think you're sleeping on Wisconsin. I think that we're starting to see them get away from the dairy raid and revert back to classic Wisconsin form. And I think that they beat Iowa this week, but we'll see.
Ooh. I don't disagree with you because Iowa is just that bad. But that's not. Offensively still, but it's not a here nor there. That's more of a personnel thing than honestly a scheme thing.
You know what's crazy? Iowa's receivers were like, I don't know if you can see them. You can't see them on the broadcast, but when I was at the game, I'm like, damn, their receivers are not bad. Like they're getting open, they're creating some separation. Just they got the Cade McNamara.
They've scored 40 points 3 times this year. The Hawkeyes have scored 40 points 3 times. It's like and what's his name wasn't even on the sideline the first game.
Ferentz.
Oh, Ferentz.
Yeah, Ferentz.
No, yeah, Tim Lester. I think Tim Lester's. I tell you what, man. If they can get a quarterback, like if they would have gotten a quarterback that wasn't Cade McNamara, that would have been a pretty nasty team, dude.
Oh, if you looked at Iowa's schedule entering this season, they had a quarterback. They're the number 1 team in the Big Ten right now. There's no other way to put it.
It's very possible because those wide receivers were they were not bad. They really weren't.
They were not bad. But you know who is going to be bad on Saturday? Penn State. Why? Because when the light shine brightest, they always falter. They do it time and time again. That's what they do. I mean, they're going to do it again.
No, this year changes. This year changes things.
What about this year is different than any other year? You can't tell me Kowalkanaski. I can't say his last name. I'm sorry. First of all, any last thing that has any Eastern European origin, I'm like Jeff Barnes, sweating. Do not ask me to pronounce because I will butcher it. I do apologize to the people of Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and then also in the bottom, the former countries that made up Yugoslavia, Russia, and just anyone.
Colton Nicky. It's not very difficult. It's not. It's not hard at all.
That's pretty hard. There's not a lot of Polish names in Hawaii, dog.
The real coordinator that no one seems to be talking about Penn State that does have a history of causing issues with Ryan Day in Ohio State is Tom Allen, the defensive coordinator at Penn State. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys remember, Ryan Day playing those Indiana teams. I mean, that Indiana team with Michael Penix, Ty Freifel, they almost beat him, and that wasn't because of Michael Penix. I mean, a good part of it was, but the defenses were very good. They had a couple corners that were very locked down. Porter, I think, was one of the names. I mean, they had a linebacker that had like 7 million tackles, was all over the field. I mean, and those guys, none of those guys really did anything in the pros. So that was pretty much all scheme. And we're seeing the Penn State defenses. This is probably the best defense that Ohio State's gonna see, top to bottom. You don't have your classic bully Penn State linebackers like usually there's a Puzzlesny or something like that. But I mean, the pass rushes, the defensive line is just insane. The pass rush is insane. The defensive backs, I mean, they're great. Tom Allen, he's coaching the Big Ten. In my opinion, he's a more impressive, scary coordinator than Kotolenki.
I think that's a very fair point. I just want to add to this by saying here's exactly what's going to happen on Saturday. Penn State is going to get all hyped up for this game because they think it's their year. And James Franklin's going to have a rah-rah speech where he's going to mention about determination and grit and hard work. And it's all about the size of the dog in the fight, the size of the fight of the dog. And they're going to storm the field. And then they're going to remember that they don't have elite wide receivers. And then when Ohio State stacks the box is able to somewhat contain the run, they're going to make Drew Aller forced to pass the ball if he plays. And then they're going to remember why Drew Aller is Drew Aller. I don't know.
Whoa. I don't know, man. I don't
going to the ground.
We're on the same side as far as this bet goes, but I definitely think Drew Aller is better than you do. I can tell that.
Yeah.
I think Drew Aller is good. I just don't think he's consistent. I think that when you're good, not consistent, when you play a team like Ohio State.
Has he been inconsistent this year, though?
There's been some times where you go, what the hell am I watching?
Bro.
Greg, back me up on this.
There's been a couple of games where Drew Aller has had bad moments, but consistently speaking, he is far better this year than he was last year.
Is he any more inconsistent than Dylan Gabriel at Oregon?
Way more.
No way.
No, I don't think. I don't agree. I don't agree with that either.
Also, Dylan Gabriel was going to wide open wide receivers. I was got to put
but what I'm saying is, like, it's easy to pick on Drew Aller because it's easy to call Drew Aller inconsistent because he has a track record of being inconsistent, right? But I think that he has overcome that more than people want to give him credit for.
Yeah,
because he isn't. I think if you compare him, if you look at everybody with a fresh slate, just at their 2024 resume, dude, I don't know if there's been a Big Ten quarterback that's played better, really.
Greg, did you have a final question for?
There's a couple of that.
Drum roll, please. Our flat-footed dead tie. Now at the top of our FOTS friend of the show rankings, we now have a new tie at number 1 with me, Josh Keatly, Donovan James. But yes, do you have a final question for our guest, Greg?
I see JTT coming out to the NFL this year. Does Tyleik Williams stay at Ohio State, or does he go to the NFL?
No, he's gone. I think
he's gone.
Yeah, I think the only year he has left would be his COVID year, anyways. I believe.
Good. Well, they're both redshirt juniors.
Is that right? Tyleik Williams ain't coming back. I don't think he's coming back. He's the only defensive lineman that's still getting first round grades from the scouts that I talked to. I'd be shocked if he comes back. I mean, maybe there's a lot of NIL cash floating around in Columbus, so that's the reason why I'm asking, because the NIL money could keep him there, right? This game of NIL roulette. It's pretty wild. So if he gets a grade where someone was telling me basically, like, if you're not guaranteed to go to the first round, it's almost better off to just stay at Ohio State with the kind of NIL shit you can get. And that's another thing that Ryan Day does that I want to give credit to. You have these programs like Ole Miss, Miami. They're trying to find guys and bring them in with their NIL cash that, for as much shit as they get for Will Howard, Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Downs, this is the $20 million roster. Most of that money went to the guys that are on the roster. Like, they're not getting enough, like, they're not getting enough credit. He doesn't get enough credit for that. I will defend Ryan Day in that manner, that he's the first people that he tries to protect are the guys that are here that want to stay here. So there's a chance. I wouldn't bet on it though. He's had the best season of all the defensive line.
There we go.
Yeah, it's just that when you hear about the defensive line, the tackles, especially for this year, you always hear the two guys from that school up north, right? Yeah. I mean, it's Graham and Ken and that's it.
Yeah,
so
well, he's gonna Tyler Williams is really gonna. I think he's gonna blow the doors off the combine too. I think it's gonna be. He can be right up there if he wants to.
But again, he could fall through the second round just because of who's available at other positions and all that fun sort of stuff because of the team needs, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
If he falls to the second round, I think it would have more to do with Ohio State falling apart, Jim Knowles falling apart, than it would have to do with him. I could see it, but I think it would be more like a victim of circumstance more than anything.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying because of the way that the NFL draft could work with these teams always reaching for a quarterback. The corners are going to go early, right? The two guys from Michigan are both going to get drafted very early. Does Williams
go early?
Well, yeah,
I think if you ask me like, hey, which Ohio State guy is gonna really surprise people either in the NFL draft or as a rookie, it's probably JTT. I think JTT's been held back a lot by this defensive scheme, but I think he blows it up at the combine. I think he starts as a rookie. I think if he lands in a nice landing spot, we could see a very similar Chase Young rookie year. He's really athletic. He's
very good. JTT is very good, and again, because of the way that the Buckeyes are not going off the snap of the football, a la what Michigan did for years with Aiden Hutchinson and those guys who just did not get off the ball very quickly. And that includes that horrible draft pick from that school up north that the Dallas Cowboys made. Oh, Lord, that's a horrible.
Mozzie Smith.
Mozzie.
They dropped a taco too. That's right. I forgot about that.
I bought a Taco Charlton signed Michigan jersey, and the dude was like, "Are you sure you want to buy this? You're an Ohio State fan." I said, but he was selling it for like $10 because that's how big of a bust he was. It's like, yoink, that's mine. Good old Taco.
Oh yeah, yeah. When they could have had T.J. Watt.
So in that same vein, Josh, other than the sort of obvious names that we've been bandying about, are there any other maybe a little lesser known players at Ohio State that you feel have a good chance to be strong professionals, either as contributors or maybe even starters at the next level?
I mean, everybody. I think that Will Howard has played a lot better than people thought. Like, I think he's got. I don't think he's going to be like. He's not going to be a first round pick like Bo Nix or Michael Penix, but I could see him having a very similar like Spencer Rattler landing spot where like they don't fear starting him and they don't fear playing him. Emeka Egbuka gets slept on with all this Jeremiah Smith hype, but Emeka Egbuka, I think he's going to be a first round pick, so this is kind of a moot point. Once the combine happens and he runs a 4.2 and he measures in at 6 foot, he's going to go in the first round. But everybody kind of sleeps on him. But that dude is good. That dude's still the best receiver at Ohio State. That dude can do it all, man. He's really good. Donovan Jackson kind of gets shit on because he's had a rough year and he had a rough last year. But that's another guy that's going to step right in and start in the NFL. Kind of like Thayer Munford got a little bit, kind of got shit on his last couple years at Ohio State, drafted in the 7th round for the Raiders, but got some spot starts. Donovan Jackson's going to start in the NFL. It's going to be very good. Cody Simon's going to be in the NFL for a long time, very much in the same vein as I see Tommy Eichenberg, Jerome Baker, Raekwon McMillan. Maybe not a star, but he's going to surprise people with how long he's there. I don't think anybody would be shocked by Denzel Burke being a dude. I think some people would be shocked by Lathan Ransom, though. I think Lathan Ransom is also going to be in the NFL for a long time. He's better than Ronnie Hickman, and Ronnie Hickman's really giving it his all at the Browns. So they got talent everywhere, man.
Gotcha. Okay. Greg, any final questions for our now tied for number one, FOTS, Friends of the Show rankings, Joshua Keatly. Any final questions from you, Greg Rector?
You end the season against the Indiana Hoosiers, do you not?
Yeah, Indiana comes to Columbus. When do they come to Columbus?
That's after the Michigan game, isn't it?
Wait, Michigan's not the last.
Right before Michigan.
Or right before Michigan. Yeah, exactly.
Right before Michigan.
How good of a day does Curtis Rourke end up having against the Buckeyes?
Dude, the Indiana thing, like I said, I love. No one loves Kurt Cignetti more than me. No one's been talking about Kurt Cignetti.
Maybe his wife. But...
Oh, we've reached a point. It kind of reminds me. There was that who was the wide receiver from Iowa State? Was it? He's in the UFL now. You guys know who I'm talking about. Whatever. Everybody hated him and hated him and hated him and hated him, and I was like. And I never liked him. But then everybody hated him so much that I was like, guys, he's not that bad. Like, we're going to look. It's kind of happened with Kurt Cignetti where I loved him so much. And everybody's like, Indiana's going to the national championship. And I'm like, Jesus, guys, let's calm down. Curtis Rourke is one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten. Super underrated. Definitely the most athletic. He's probably the most athletic quarterback. He's definitely the most athletic quarterback in the Big Ten. But, dude, it's just there's no way. I'm not worried about that game at all. The depth of they're not gonna. It's just too much for. Eventually, the depth of Indiana is going to have to prevail, and they're just simply not going to be able to. And that's a long way off. And I mean, Curtis Rourke's already kind of getting beat up. They're not going to be able to. I'm not worried about Indiana at all. That's going to be a game, especially if they're good. It'll be. You guys remember the year that Ohio State beat Michigan State like 50-0? Michigan State was ranked like 5. Was that the 2021 Michigan State?
Multiple years you can say that happened.
There was it was yes, yep, I think so. Right? Yeah. Because Michigan State won the bowl game that year. But Michigan State came into Columbus, CJ Stroud was starting, and they just lit him up, dude. They lit him up, and everybody thought that's the vibe I get from this Indiana team. You know, that was the one good year Mel Tucker had, and Ohio State was ready for him because Michigan State was so good, and then they just pounded him into the dirt. And I think that's what's going to happen with Indiana. They're just not, especially if Ohio State's ready and ramped up for it. They just don't have the Ryan Day can't screw it up. The talent gap is that big.
I don't know. I kind of disagree because there's many glaring differences between a Mel Tucker run program and also a Kurt Cignetti program. One was the fact that Cignetti has won a lot of games in multiple spots where Tucker only had like a 7-6 season in Colorado before going up to Michigan State. Secondly, the whole fact that Cignetti's not a sexual predator might help him as well. But I'm not comparing their coach. Instead of watches ladies.
I'm not comparing their coaching resumes. I'm comparing the talent and hype that those teams had. I mean, that when Michigan State came into Columbus, Big Noon was there, Game Day was there. Ohio State was only favored by like 6 points.
It was only 6 or 6.5, wasn't it? 6.5.
Yeah, it was crazy. The expectations were crazy, and Ohio State just came out and just shoved them into the dirt. They just don't have. I just don't think Indiana had. No, I don't care if Vince Lombardi coaches them. Indiana just, especially if they're good and Ohio State's ready for it and ramped up and they don't come out sleepy.
Well, notice I didn't say Indiana would beat. Notice I didn't say Indiana was going to beat Ohio State. I just asked you how good of a day Curtis Rourke would have to have. That was because I'm
a fantasy.
I live up here in Canada, Josh. So I love the Canadians getting their notice and their due, and Curtis Rourke is going to be in the NFL a whole lot longer than his big brother Nathan was.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Nathan might have Ohio, so that might help.
Nathan might have screwed up too, trying to hang on for so long, man. Now his confidence is all out of whack and competing with Vernon Adams and.
Well, Vernon's got the job.
Vernon's good.
Ladies, gentlemen, there's nothing wrong. I'm talking not to you guys, but to the football players of the world. There's nothing wrong with being a Bethel Thompson, a quarterback that played what?
No, I mean the problem with Nathan Rourke is that he just never got a shot in. Yeah, well, Nathan's way better than that. That's the problem is that he's right on the verge of being good enough to play in the NFL, and they just like. But he's kind of a soft-spoken dude. When he went to OU, I had the honor of talking to him a couple times, meeting him a couple times. We actually interviewed him on the Browns Wire podcast because the Browns were, the rumor was that they were pretty interested in him. Big athletic kid, Idaho. I think he was the Idaho Bowl MVP that year. But I think that his confidence, he was just very kind of a quiet confidence kind of guy. And I think that when he got cut by, what was it? I mean, he got cut by like 7 NFL teams like a year. That can be hard on you.
Yeah. He kept getting picked up off the transfer, the practice squads by team after team. Yeah. And he just never got out on the field to actually play anything. He should have stayed back in BC when he was actually there the first time. He shouldn't have gone down to the NFL until he had been a little more established at the CFL level. That was his mistake.
Yeah.
I think he's done with the NFL journey now. So he signed that big old contract now.
Yeah.
So, one last shot to ask a question of our now flat-footed Todd number 1 FOTS friend of the show, Joshua Keatly. Either the Bayface Assassin Brock Beard, do you have a final question?
No,
Greg.
I think we kick it up more than this time.
Greg, have you gotten out?
I'm good. I'm good now. We've discussed pretty much everything we can discuss.
Indeed.
Even though these two guys are going to lose tomorrow's game, I'm sorry, you guys. I'm sorry. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. The Penn State Nittany Lions are going to win at Happy Valley. I'm sorry. It's just going to happen.
Well, on that rather happy note, if you are a Penn State fan at least, I will once again ask Josh to tell us what he's working on, where he's dropping information, articles, podcasts, etc., where people can find and follow his work. That's just suspense building. Here we go.
You there?
Now we got you.
Back now. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you see me? Can you hear me?
See you and hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Just so tell people where they can find and follow your work, please.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Wait. Oh, yeah. Follow me on X at Josh Keatly 16. Definitely check out the Ohio State of Mind podcast every Monday at 9:00. And then you can find my work at Buckeyes Wire. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you for coming. Our new tied at the top of the rankings, number 1 friend of the show, Joshua Keatly. So once again, Diamond James, if you felt a coldness in your soul, there's only one way to fix it. Come see us. So it is always an honor, a privilege, a pleasure to be joined by the one, the only Joshua Keatly. If you care at all about college football, and if you think you are an Ohio State fan or think you hate Ohio State but like to know what's going on, check out his work, the Ohio State State of Mind podcast. Follow him on Twitter. Follow him on Instagram. I don't know, TikTok. I don't know where else he is to be found. He is the one, the only Joshua Keatly. That's at Josh Keatly 16 on X/Twitter. Ladies, gentlemen, children of all ages, the ships at sea. We are OUT out.